some announcements before public comment?
Well, we call to order and see.
Yep. Thank you,
Yeah,
Melissa.
got done. Wow, you're fast, Melissa.
So I'm going to call to order a resumption of a regular meeting for the Hastings and Hudson Board of Education for April 4th, 2024. I've moved public comment, or we've moved public comment after announcements, just as an FYI. So are there any district announcements that you want to highlight in particular?
When we get into my report under 4A, I'll do a little more detail, but not a lot. But there is listed in the public record here upcoming meetings and key dates.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gerson. I'm going to invite the public to comment. We have a 3-minute comment period, and Melissa will be timing. We're just waiting on the list to get started. Let me see if that works.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ruth Kaplan. I'm the mother of a 5th grader. I think I wrote to many of you on the music department in the school budget. So I just wanted to give you a little personal taste of what the music department means to our family and take that into consideration when voting on the budget. So for my son, the music program really forms the backbone of his school experience and really gives him structure in his life. He's a very musical and talented and he's a very creative person. And the music department has really allowed him to channel his emotional and creative needs into like a very useful, fruitful way. If he is sick on days where there's band, he's upset because he can't go to band. And he's not the kind of kid who loves school for the academics, but he loves going to school because of the music program. He's done the 4th grade band, he's done 5th grade band, and now jazz band. And I think the reason why it's so powerful in his life is not just because there is a music program, but because of how the staff is able to give the personalized attention to each student in the ensemble. So he's really gotten to know the teachers, and the teachers have gotten to know him in a very fruitful way that has given him so much motivation to continue. And so what worries me is that if we lose a teacher in the department and we're stretching everybody else more thin in their duties, they won't necessarily have the personal bandwidth or the professional or emotional bandwidth as teachers to be able to then give their instruction and their attention to each student in the ensemble in the way that they do now. The music department, I think, is filled with talented teachers, and they're wonderful, but I don't want to stretch them and push them further than they should be stretched and pushed. So I would urge you to please consider keeping the music program staffed at the same level that it is now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michael Guyard. My son Sam is in 5th grade.
Give your address, please.
Sorry?
Your address.
Oh, 190 High Street. I'm just going to echo a lot of things that Ruth said about the music program, specifically speaking to my experience with our son, Sam, who has experienced a lot of challenges. He is a brilliant kid who learns in a very particular way and encounters a lot of difficulties that are hard to pinpoint in a traditional classroom setting. And music has provided him with this this outlet where he really feels like he's seen. His connection to Mr. Rubino has been so meaningful, and he's thrived as a result of the attention that they've been able to pay to him directly. And I am concerned about the bandwidth issue if the funding were cut for this, this position, this role. I think there just wouldn't be the capacity to pay attention to Sam and his particular needs. And yeah, it would be a shame to lose that. So that's about it.
Thank you. Hi, good
Hello.
evening.
I'm a performer, but I'm nervous speaking, so please forgive me. I have to read my notes here, okay? So, my name is Clint DeGannon. For those of you who don't know me, which is probably everybody, I'm a professional musician who grew up in Hastings and graduated in 1976.
Your address is,
Sorry?
your address?
I live in Nyack, so I'm not a resident here, but I was told that alumni would be welcome to speak on behalf of this specific issue if I miss. I'm sorry?
No, it's okay, you can speak, anyone can speak, yeah.
Okay, well, I just wanted to, because I've been alerted to the issue and the potential cut here, I wanted to pass along my experience at Hastings and how it's affected, how it created not only my career, but the careers of at least 12 to 14 other professional musicians, all of whom are operating on a high level today. So during a rather finite period at one point or another, and then I left off, there were all of these musicians whose spark was created not by their talent, which is like a small chunk, and the hard work, which is a larger chunk, but primarily, I mean, I want to say like 95% is one's experience in school with the teachers. So at the time we had Peter DeLuke, we had Larry Hayden, we had Ed Riglowitz. These are names from yesteryear. But I mean, those people and great teachers, if you can get them, if you can keep them, make all of the difference in the world. So I'm going to tell you just for a second so you know that what I've done. I was recently inducted by the Hastings Alumni Association into the Hall of Excellence just a couple months ago. I performed last year with the New York Philharmonic at David Geffen Hall, with Stevie Wonder at Radio City Hall, with Seth MacFarlane at Rockefeller Center, at Carnegie Hall this month with Carlos Santana, Barry Manilow, and Melissa Manchester. I've appeared on Saturday Night Live, David Letterman, Good Morning America, The View, played all the seasons of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and the most recent soundtrack to Steven Spielberg's remake of West Side Story. I'm not alone, right? I'm proud of what I've done, but I owe it all to the music program. I'm not a little, not half. So what happened is these gifted teachers lit the fire under people, so it became cool to be a musician, and they were talented, sure, but the teachers were so gifted that it fostered this. It's like, you know, the movies you might see, whether, was it Mr. Holland's Opus or whatever, you know, it's a real deal. So the last thing I want to impart is that just yesterday, I had a meeting with the president of Local 802, which is the largest local, 7,300 members of the American Federation of Musicians. Largest local not only in the United States, but in North America. And she said to me, unsolicited, the president, with regard to problems where we have some people who excel, and it was related at a point for a conversation for DEI and trying to get people on the same page and trying to get less qualified people, more qualified, et cetera, et cetera. And she said specifically, if there were more high schools like the one she went to, like the one I went to, that really invested in the arts instead of either made them disappear or chipped away at them, we would have so many more qualified people who are prepared and ready to compete. And right now, we're running into problems like that. So I came here from my home in Nyack. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm done.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you didn't sound nervous at all. You did not.
Hi, Alex Salunius, 14 Euclid. First, I want to thank Ms. Cases for setting the importance of school attendance, with her pushing everyone to bring their kids in on time. Second, I want to draw attention to author Jonathan Haidt. He's recently published a book on the dangers of phone and social media on children. It's called The Anxious Generation. I highly recommend that, or many of the recent articles that's written by him or about him in the Times, The Atlantic. I think this is especially important to this people and power in the school in order to change the school's use and often misuse of technology. I encourage everyone to read the latest research on kids and technology, and also ask the school to start to review and change their technology and phone policies. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm back. Andy Zimmerman, 7 Ridge Street. Well, I just wanted to impart to you all some statistics that I have assembled, some numbers, since I feel like we need some hard numbers, and I hope the board will ask or insist on getting numbers for the music program as to how many kids are in each ensemble, in each class, in each lesson, so you will know how overcrowded they are. But anyway, these are some numbers from the neighboring districts. Briarcliff Manor, I'm going to take my glasses off. Briarcliff Manor has 168 students per music teacher. Croton Harmon, 193. Dobbs Ferry, 217. Irvington, 218. Ardsley, 258. Bronxville, 259. Pleasantville, 265. Mount Pleasant, 271. And Edgemont, 282. Now compare that to us. We started out last year with 270, which is already higher than all but 2 of those. Then when we went down to 5.6 music teachers from 6 this year, it's 289 students per teacher, which is higher than any of our neighbors, than any of the ones that I've cited here. And if it goes up to 5, if the teachers go down to 5.2, as I understand is the revised proposal, we will then have 311 students per music teacher, higher than all the others. Does that mean Hastings cares less about music? Does that mean we can somehow magically do more with less, especially at a time when we have more students involved in music than ever before? I don't see how it's possible. The math doesn't add up. And I will give these figures to the board. Anyway, all right, that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Risa Kaufman, 121 Euclid Avenue. I'm a member of the Alliance for the Music program. So thank you again for the intensive effort that goes into preparing and considering the budget. And thank you also for listening to the concerns of community members. I spoke last week or last meeting, so I'll be very brief. But first, I just want to really assure you that the concerns that you've been hearing and that you are hearing about the proposed cuts to the music budget, they're not based on misunderstanding or misinformation. We hear you that the current teachers will work hard to absorb the lost position and that there won't be cuts to specific classes. We hear that. Nevertheless, parents, students, alumni, community members were concerned, as reflected in the almost 300 community members who signed a letter that was shared with the board earlier this week. Hastings' music program is strong and our teachers are excellent. Cutting a music position, a teaching position, going from 6 to 5 teachers for the entire district represents a real diminishment of our program. Teachers will make do because they have to. But this cut devalues the work they do, places an unfair pressure on them, and translates into less individualized attention and the opportunity for students. So Dr. McCursky, in his last community update, noted, quote, "Performing arts are a signature for Hastings." They really are. And I join others here to urge the board to reconsider the cuts to the music program. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Voda, and I live at 70 Flower Avenue. So I am here to talk about the music budget and the potential cuts, but I do not know any numbers or figures. In fact, I really couldn't tell you until just a minute ago how many music teachers Hastings even has. And that's because I have a 4th grader who just joined the music program this year, and he's an energetic, adorable little child with an IEP, and he started playing the saxophone this year, which I was thrilled about. I wasn't sure how well he'd do with his fine motor and his attention, but he loves it, and he's really excited to go to saxophone lessons every week and band when it meets. But unfortunately, they don't actually meet that often. And that's when I heard this, that kind of, got me thinking about like putting 2 and 2 together with the part-time position and how frequently the band rehearsals have been canceled and not rescheduled at Hillside. And I don't know if folks know about that, but when group instrumental music classes are canceled due to fire drills or, needing the cafeteria auditorium space for the school play or assemblies, they're not made up. And then band rehearsal in 4th grade is canceled very frequently. I'd estimate they probably rehearsed like 5 or 6 times this year. So I don't know what the spring concert's going to sound like or if there even will be one, but my point is that whatever, I'm assuming that this is tied to the part-time nature of Mr. Urbino's position. Maybe it's not, but whatever is happening is not giving the kids the continuity and the cohesion that really, especially like starting a music program, starting a new instrument, learning how to play in an ensemble kind of requires. So I just want everyone to keep that in mind as you're planning to move forward, that there is not currently enough time at Hillside for all these kids to get their lessons in and to get their band rehearsal in. Both my parents were music teachers. I grew up playing instruments, and I know how important that continuity is. And so I just want everyone to understand kind of what's going on. And then just in relation to what the previous speaker said, I'm also an educator myself, and I know that there is that tension between excellence and efficiency and equity, and it's really just not possible to keep cutting things and expecting teachers to perform at this higher and higher quality and expect there to not be that burnout that occurs. So I know that our teachers here are great and are always willing to work hard, but it's not usually sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it? Okay. Thank you all for coming. We're going to move on to our budget presentation. Topically, we're going to be focused on the use and presence of reserves budget and how they form part of the 5-year planning that we're required to do. So I'll introduce Maureen Caraballo, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll start when we're ready. I'll just do a little overview before Maureen picks it up. Do you want me to go or wait?
You can go.
Okay. So let me just give you a short narrative. This is your third presentation, board, and obviously it'll be very much in the public tonight, and then what Maureen presents will be posted. Some of the narrative I'll share now we will put out as of, certainly this Friday, we'll have our first FAQ, frequently asked question document out. There's quite a significant one as you've been listening very carefully to parents in the community and students regarding music, so that'll be the first question we'll address and answer with great detail, both some qualitative and definite quantitative. We'll put numbers in to really help people understand where we are. And you as a board have till the 16th to decide, so you're still in the decision process, gathering the information. But let me do a quick overview. One of the positive outgrowths of COVID-19, and this occurred also in my life in Connecticut, superintendents became quite well connected. We communicate and meet a lot. And I do that both through the Westchester, there are two major associations, Westchester and then multiple county, plus remember Tri-State, which the district does spend money on, but it's I think a very important membership. That's New Jersey, Connecticut, and New York State districts. And we just picked a new executive director, and I'm on the advisory committee called the board for that, so I was busy with that. But that gave me a lot of insights. So for example, when I walked into the room, the Connecticut group, all of whom I know, were in a corner talking budget. In the New York group, Tri-State, were in a corner talking budget. I wasn't quite sure where to go. But here's the serious point. This is a very difficult time for districts, and Tri-State, and like Hastings, are largely well-to-do communities. I know there are people in Hastings who struggle. I live in Greenwich, believe it or not, people in Greenwich struggle. Has a higher poverty rate than Hastings by a good margin, by the way. So this is a time of struggle in many ways for districts of this ilk. We feel very pleased that we are bringing you, relative to what I'm hearing from my fellow superintendents, we're bringing you a very good budget. We're bringing you a budget that is affordable for the residents of Hastings, and that matters, I think, almost first, because 90% of every dollar we have largely comes from the taxpayers here. Grant opportunities for districts like this are far and few between. We get those when we can. The federal and state resources have gone backwards a bit, so that's less of a source. But we're bringing a budget that we think for the community is very affordable. And as we'll try and keep showing over the next week or two, because you need to make a decision, that every single program we have now, we will offer next year. And that's across all the areas. Now, having said that, around us, not far, we have a district or two very near us that's cutting teachers, cutting administrators, looking at some very deep situations. We're looking at some other districts having to go to override. So this is the context we're in. We're looking at increases in Connecticut districts of 4 to 5 to 6% a year. We're looking at most of the districts around us at increases of 4 or 5%. In New York State, the cash reserve ability, the reserve accountability is very, very important. You don't have that in Connecticut. So that, though, has to get managed very, very carefully. But we have made reductions. We've made reductions in this proposed budget away from students. We've made reductions in clerical. We've made reductions in custodial. We've made a reduction in technology that has Maureen and me a little bit concerned because of the degree of support that's necessary on the tech side. Great questions from the community around the use of technology. We're going to dig into that. This shouldn't affect that, but it's kind of what our students are doing with technology, the ability to get to it. We've made a reduction in communications. We've made reductions in security. We still are a very safe and secure district, but we've had to make reductions there. We've made reductions in the number of aides, not those required through IEPs. Those are necessary and vital, but we've made reductions there. We also have to staff up relative to enrollment needs and demand. So our kindergartners currently are in a number of sections. When they go to first grade, they'll still have roughly the size class, but the section will be reduced because that's what enrollment demands. And HTA understands, they're supportive, they know that we staff up relative to the student. Fifth grade, and I've been spending all week in fifth grade, as I'll explain later, running 40-minute lessons on the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. I've done that now for 5-6 years. It's rigorous, it's challenging, and my goodness, our fifth graders really respond. But I'm in those classrooms for 45-minute lessons 5-6 times this week, so I'm right in it. That fifth grade group rising is used to a larger number of sections, but we can't do that. The class sizes will stay the same, but based on the student numbers, that's where the enrollment is. There are also some things we're not getting to, that Hastings we have to get to. We have a new Eagle Eye middle school principal who's saying, for example, in MTS interventions, we're providing those in math, we're not adequate in ELA. So we really have to look at ways going forward, not this coming year, but in future years, how do we make sure we have the resource to provide those critical interventions for our students? Because as talented as our students are, and our seniors now are getting into wonderful institutions, to me it's the best match for them, and they're getting good matches, that all our students need attention, and MTS and other interventions are critical. Science research. You'll see that we go way above our weight class with science research. Ms. Melissa Chandroff and what she does was remarkable. There's been strong interest in expanding that to 3 years. We can't do that right now. So we are maintaining and providing all of the programs, and we think we're doing it in a way that should be supportive and helpful to the residents of Hastings, but then to all of our students. So that's the narrative. We will begin in the FAQs putting some more numbers to the particular questions we're hearing. They're excellent questions. I want to compliment Hastings for being incredibly respectful around very difficult questions. I've been in places where people go to the mic and literally tell me I should be fired. I've been in places where they go to the mic and they say JFK was a leader and you are not, quote unquote. You know, so I'm used to it. So Hastings, don't pick that one up. But I really want to compliment Hastings for around some difficult issues being very respectful and dignified. And full circle, we'll work hard with you as a board over the next couple of weeks to help you get to the decisions you need to make. But again, in context, this is a strong budget. And as Maureen's going to show, and now's the setup, by requirement, we have to talk with you about the multi-year budget as we see it. We have to talk to you about cash reserves. And you'll see that there are some thunderclouds out there that we have to pay attention to that unfortunately are upon our neighboring districts. They're not upon us right now, but if we're not smart and wise, they could be upon us. So I hope that narrative helps, a little bit longer than you wanted, but this is a time for you to hear from me a bit, which you just did. So, yep.
Sorry, I just want to say something that I know the response can't be now, but just for the sake of those community members that beckon on us, the board, I just want to say that I would, not today because it cannot be today, but at some point, I want to see if we have a 6, how much change we would have in our budget. I know it's 5.2 now, but if it's a 6, what will be the change in the budget? It's a question that I want to ask for another time, not for today. Thank you.
And I may, for the board, right, I think the best exercise right now is to have Maureen go through this full presentation, and given you've had all 3, right after that may be a good time for us to start hearing questions you'd like answered, which could be an example, that could be an example. So Maureen, if you want to pick it up.
Okay, so as Bill set up, we'll go through the required items. And again, when you think of a budget, and this would be what you would do in your own home, I would hope, but you can't buy things today if you can't afford them tomorrow, right? And, you know, part of the state very wisely years ago said, boards of education, it's your fiscal requirement not only to look at today and today's dollars, but to understand what that means going forward and what you can sustain. And that's why during the times we got COVID money and all the rest, some districts either, you know, if you were to rely too heavily on those are the districts, many of which there's districts, it's been on the front page of the newspaper, that are finding themselves $6 million in the hole. I mean, that's a $6 million cut. So, I mean, this is really, I've seen it occur before. The state, you know, state of New York is also unable to come to a budget, right? Budget's due March 31st. There is no state budget. I, you know, was told today, and as you know, that they're proposing reductions in our aid and even maybe further than what we've put in. This is like an optimistic view on what we shall receive. And being that the state controller has already, in his report, not my own, so anyone is, you know, can read it, that the state itself is going to be billions of dollars in the hole. So I think just as fiscal stewards here, you do have to think about what we can pay for and what we can maintain. And I think, in addition, we do have many liabilities. And when we walk through those tonight, I'll highlight, and we are required to have money to pay those liabilities because they're real, right? So beyond our own budget, there's these other things in reserve that are, we are aware of, and we have a requirement to pay for those. So And all of these do relate to the budget, because whatever you do will have an impact. And I was meeting with a lot of my colleagues today, and everyone is extremely stressed, and many people are taking significant reductions in their budgets next year. Okay, so just to show you where we are in our schedule, and this does not include all the pre-work we did in the fall, which was provide a lot of this context, and we did review the 5-year plan at that time also, but now we, of course, have our updated spending plan. So what we did tonight is we actually reversed the order of how we have done this in the past, because really to speak about the reserves and the 5-year plan, I think without really having a full understanding of that, it would be impossible to adopt the budget this year and feel comfortable in what you're adopting. This is the budget to budget at a glance. Again, a moderately small increase, considering we saw almost 8% increase in our benefit costs alone of about $1 million. So just coming in at 3.53, as Dr. McCursey mentioned, we did do a significant amount of reductions. There are 7 people that actually are losing jobs that have been told, and there's going to be a significant unemployment liability for those as well. So again, even beyond this, it took us quite a bunch of rounds to get to what you see tonight. And again, we're right up to that allowable growth, which is 3.19. And the proposed tax levy, of course, is negative, but that is really just a matter of the way the assessed valuation is calculated. But for the most part, most people will see somewhere up to a 3% increase in their taxes. Okay, again, we put these in the PowerPoints because they live on our website, and I'm not going to read all the definitions, but I think, you can see these for yourself, and just kind of an explanation of what, by definition, that, what is a reserve for a district. So we look at this chart each year. What I did include in here is I gave you the first column really reflects where did we end, that's actually June 30th, 2023. Where did we end the fiscal year last year in terms of our total reserves? And reserves, the reserves on the top of the chart are what are considered restricted. And they're restricted, and they have to have an actual liability connected to it. You could, there are tax cert reserves, but if you do not have tax cert liabilities, you cannot fund this reserve. So I think I've explained this before. It was on a future slide. Currently, well, at the end of last year, we had 1.8 million in that reserve. And we believe our estimate for the balance of that reserve at the end of this fiscal year, but a lot of this has to do with timing of payments of things that are either, when they're negotiated and ordered through the courts is when we pay these settlements. Currently, I think there's about $15 million worth of outstanding claims against us. Tax certiorari is not when a homeowner challenges their taxes. These are all commercial properties, but they include rentals, and they include co-op, condos, and townhouses. So townhouses are not taxed at the same rate as a regular home. They're looked at as a rental property, although they're not. So many times, a lot of our certiorari liabilities are tied to some of those properties as well. But as an example, if there's a property and there are stores that are vacant, as an example, the people who own those properties are able to challenge their taxes, and we in fact have to refund them because they were unable to make income on that property, which means that whatever they pay in taxes, many times they can get back a significant portion of whatever they paid.
Just a
Sure.
point of clarification, I think it's important also. Is it correct that unlike a homeowner with commercial tax cert, they can also have a clawback that goes back 3 years? So
we have some that are 10 years out.
Really?
Yeah. So we try to settle, many times they have to file within a certain time frame, is what you're speaking to. But we have some tax certs that either are still, occasionally the plaintiff attorney, there's reasons they like to have them extended a bit more, because they'll make more money on what they're able to get back for their clients. So sometimes you'll see them build up. So we have many many of these reflect, or many of that liability, there may be one that has 5 or 6 years, like a bank or something. There's different ones we just paid out recently, but even when, as an example, when the Food Town property was vacant for all those years, it was, the person who owned that is going to get the money back for those years because there was no business, right? So things like that are still liabilities. But again, no one funds this completely, because if you did, you would need a lot of money in there. We typically try to keep in there what we think we'll need to pay over the next 3 to 4 years at a time. That's kind of what we do. Typically, districts fund up to about 40%. We don't, like, you could go up to 40% funding, because usually you're settling them at somewhere at that 40% range. But again, just to kind of give you a sense of, like, these are liabilities, we're aware of them. They're filed on the district. We have record of them. So not to have money in this would then require, and when I first came, they didn't have a fund, and they would bond for those monies, which then means you're, in addition, borrowing money at a high interest rate, and then further, cost the taxpayers more. So it's really, when we know we have liabilities, we have a responsibility to assure that we have the money for that. Employee benefit accrued liability. This reflects a lot of the employee contracts. Either 12-month employees have vacation days that if and when they retire, and if they haven't used those days, we have to pay them out. It's something we're required to accrue for on a yearly basis. So that just, again, reflects whoever is in those groupings at any given time. Retirement system contributions, that is a reserve that is set up for the employee retirement system specifically. Reserves, and again, typically you can keep up to about 3 to 4 years of liabilities in there. Currently, we have that's about 2 years at the end of 6/30 that we had, and many people have 3 to 4 years set up. So just to give you some context of what people like to have in that. And so we're fine, but, again, we're seeing people wanting to hold more monies in there. Liability reserve. This one is extremely important, because this reflects actual lawsuits that are filed against the district that we know we're going to have to pay out on. And the concern I have, especially with this particular one, is we already, at the end of this year, we've already paid out a good amount of money. We're not going to be able to generate fund balance to replenish these. So as these lawsuits continue to be monies that we may owe, as an example, they will have to be then budgeted in the actual budget and have to come from. So if we didn't have this money, as an example, this year, we're calculated to spend about $800,000 in settlements. We would have had a budget for that, and that would be equivalent of like 7 teaching positions we'd have to cut to fund those liabilities. So again, the need to ensure that we're able to save some money to, keep these, having the monies, again, when we know we have a liability. And not that we have money in there for this, but actually a neighboring district said many districts are getting hit with the CVA claims now, Child Victims Act, and many of them are going out of pocket because insurance doesn't cover those. So some of our neighboring districts, sometimes they're $3 to $4 million, and they have to be paid out of your own budget. So these are all these kind of new things that are kind of coming onto the scene that districts are now reserving for, because they're actually paying them out, and we're seeing that. Because anything prior to like 1990 something, like, they would not be covered by any insurance. So, but again, just these kind of, we're seeing a lot more legal liability things that we're not, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, we weren't seeing. Unemployment reserve is what it says. We, unlike a private business, we do not pay FUI and SUI, which are taxes that are payroll taxes that are paid by most corporations. And then the unemployment pays people when they're on unemployment. We pay direct. So if there's an unemployment claim, we pay dollar for dollar what that unemployment claim is. It's actually better for us because our payrolls are so large that it's actually cheaper than paying out the taxes. So, most governments opt into that. I think we're required to. But again, we are then required to have money to pay those claims based upon a certain percentage of our payroll. And again, we don't have that much money in it. Most districts, try to carry more than that. TRS sub-reserve, again, these are for just what it says. It's for payments for the TRS. And these were really set up to help districts manage some of the fluctuations that we're seeing and the upticks in that rate that we're paying. So that's important. Debt service is just a small amount of money that comes from interest on bonds and then needs to be used to pay down bonds. Now, the new line I included in there is an insurance reserve, and this is extremely important because we do need to fund that this year. So with the insurance industry being what it is, we were notified that any type of larger type property claims that we're having, we would have $1 million deductible to pay out of pocket. Right now, it's $10,000. So most districts do have insurance sub-reserve set up already, because as I mentioned, we do sometimes have liabilities that exceed our insurance coverage anyway, and we've been just paying those at what we call the fund level out of our budget. Being we have no wiggle room at all in our budget, if something like that were to happen, we would have to make the requisite reductions to pay for it. So right now, we're not, I mean, I would love to be able to put $1 million here, because that is our requirement. So as an example, when we had the damage on the track a few years ago at Reynolds Field, that was almost $800,000 claim that was paid. Today, if that were to happen again, we would have to pay it. We'd have to pay the first $1 million. So these are huge changes in the insurance. Again, brand new, like most districts this year, many had sub-reserves because they were finding excess costs in their insurance coverage. But the insurance, although our insurance went up almost 30% this year, which was a huge hit the last 2 years, the claims that school districts are seeing, and they said a lot of it has to do even with the Child Victim Act and property damage and storms and all the rest. But because of the extensive amount of property claims on these like larger storms, they're making us do that. Now, on some of the smaller things like a pipe, they would still let us have the lower deductibles, but on some of these larger like kind of weather-related issues, they're putting in that the districts.
Property insurance or,
This is property insurance.
and with property, the state doesn't give us any.
Well, we have insurance which costs about $300,000 a year, but because of the losses are so great and our properties are worth so much money that like that's now the requirement. We had that this is our deductible for those like large type claims. But again, just as a context, like we had a claim like that a year ago. We've typically have damages that have occurred here since I've been here that are $400,000 or $500,000 like this. I mean, if this whole hallway got flooded, it would cost about $450,000 to fix it. Like that's how significant, like, the abatements and all the rest are. So that money, we need to get into that reserve this year. But as you can see, and this is an optimistic, hopeful that we'll be able to put it in there. And a lot of this obviously was driven by the extra state aid we received this year and, more interest income and all the rest. So we're also at that last year, that was federal aid. So that really helped us, this year in terms of being able to maintain our fund level and our reserves. As you can see noted that the change year over year as a total is about 200,000, but how that's distributed, our restricted fund balances, we're projecting those to go down by $600,000. The appropriate fund balance, which means we're appropriating to balance next year's budget, is going up 400, right? So we have been consciously trying to pull away from that model because we know that that's unsustainable, because that's only if you have savings in the previous year can you generate that type of money moving forward. So, but as you can see, the big concern now is then going into that next cycle and what then, and again, this is not even knowing that this is also assuming we'll have some type of savings or some type of breakage in it, because we're only showing this to go down 1.5 million. But as you can see, the way it moves, because as you're unable, unless the budgets are able to replenish these accounts, and again, the federal aid in the last few years really kind of bailed out most districts like ourselves in trying to help us maintain these balances. But some of the concern too is more around that liability reserve, because as I said, we're able to put a lot of money into it over the last couple of years. We don't have the money to keep funding that. If we continue to have liability claims, they have to be budgeted. And again, that did not happen this year because we had this money. We actually had zero in that amount because we had this money. But if we are using it at that same rate, or if that, I don't have a crystal ball, but we will find ourselves needing to budget for those liabilities because we will have to pay them, and they're real. So again, this is just looking at that reserve. Now we see how this, and again, we are in this model hoping that we will continue to be able to assign fund balance to budget our budget. And you'll see on the next slides why, if we're unable to do so, where we run into some issues. So the next, again, these are some basically what I said. It gives really the legal definitions here, and it's, so if you kind of forget some of what I said here, you'll see what these each are, what they each mean. Oh, the capital reserve was on there, and I think we all understand that that's money set aside that has to be voted on by the public for capital projects. And also just to go back on that one, we know that on that, sorry, I just want to go back to that slide, just to remind the board that we are planning to use that available balance to pay for our boiler at Hillside that's required. And it's just that the reason it sits in there until we do the vote and until we pay it, it sits there. So we know in our minds, we've already made that decision that we need that boiler replaced, and that $1.6 million will fund that. And depending, the only reason we don't have that up for a vote right now is because we were doing the evaluation on thermal boiler at Hillside, and because we don't have the final design or decision on what that boiler will be, we don't have the final cost. But we do know that money right now is, and it reflects in this chart that we anticipate when we have to pay for that boiler sometime in '25, that money will no longer be available. And again, a lot of districts are, typically like to have about $5 million in that account. So we're not, we're pretty much underfunded there. Okay, so here we go with the 5-year, if you can read it. I know the board may
Can I
have
say
it.
one
Sure.
thing? So I've been lucky to be a superintendent in a state with no reserve potential and one with reserve potential. And the state requires you as a board to go through that kind of detail on that reserve page that you just did. You do know it's a little bit of a political hot potato in New York State right now as to how much the reserves will continue or not. We should advocate strongly for, one, to continue them, and two, manage them with great care, right, and not misuse them. But right now, I think you've just got a few points from Maureen that if we had not had those various reserve lines, it would not be a pleasant moment in Hastings. And you can see down the road, my reference to thunderclouds, some of what I meant. Beautiful village on a flood sliding spot. So, we have to worry a lot about water running through, affecting things, and that 800,000 was out of everybody's control. So that's why I won't say anything more, but maintaining a very healthy set of reserve balances is critical, and that's your fiduciary responsibility. So that's why we just have spent that kind of detail.
Right.
So now we'll move ahead.
Because I think those are the things that don't show up in our operational budget, but we're aware of, and we are required to kind of, I think, the board to understand those liabilities and ensure that there's money available to pay for them. 5-year expenses. So again, this is a model that is, again, was introduced a number of years ago as something that boards needed to review, and I think it's an excellent thing because it really trying to understand on a year-to-year basis, adding one thing, adding a dollar, adding, anything to a budget and what the impact of that is as we look at over the long term, because as we know, we do have salaries and people who work here, and they have contracts, and the impact of those total dollars year over year. So here we start at our 5-year plan expenses, and I'm just really going to start at that third column, because although I included, just for some reference, our previous budget, our estimated end of year for this year. So basically, that first column actually, no, that is correct. Okay. The second column, first column is our current budget. Second column is where we anticipate we'll end up, what we'll end up spending. And again, just as a reminder, that the monies that are either left over at the end of the year, revenues over expenses, that net dollar amount is the monies that we use to replenish reserves or put money back. As I mentioned, we need to get that money into that insurance reserve. So as an example, you can see here we spent less than our planned spending, and then that is, in fact, how the money gets into the reserves. But again, this is, at this time, an estimation, so we'll have a couple more months to see what the final number is there. But looking at the column 3, currently reflects our current spending plan, which is $59,645,000. And you can kind of, so the columns moving forward, there's, on the top the top 2 categories have 3 different levels. And the reason for that is for a variety of reasons. So salaries, although we have our current staffing and we do have current negotiated contracts, after next year, those contracts expire. So when we say high, medium, low, we're saying if, if there was a settlement of X at the higher end, and I can give you numbers, it would be a higher end settlement would be 2%. A medium settlement would be 1.5%. And again, we're talking about like an average across the board because, and again, as the board knows, there's also step and scale for many of our employees. So in addition to, like, say, on the teacher scale, they make it a 4% increase on their step, plus whatever the settlement is, or an administrator or a clerical person, they get their cost of living plus the step. So you can see in the 25, 26, you can see year over year, our salaries just based upon a CPI, a cost of living adjustment of, say, 1.5, our salaries still grow by about 1.4 million year over year. And again, as we look at the employee benefits and seeing the impact, this year we saw almost an 8% year-over-year impact in our benefit costs. We had an 11% increase in our health insurance cost, which was almost $800,000. And the health insurance consortium, and I believe Dr. McCursey may have heard this from his superintendent colleagues, because we were required to go to the meeting, and they've already told us 25, 26, it's going to be at least 8%. So again, on a $8 million bill, $7.5 million bill, it's a lot of money. So just to give some context, so you can see very quickly, as we just look at 24, 25, we would need then, our budget would be our budget growth is anywhere between a $2 to $3 million growth, right? Even if we just pick the middle category. So although it's only a 3.62 year over year, it is a good chunk of change, over our current spending plan. And this is if there's not one other thing needed, one other teacher added. I think, Bill mentioned before, our enrollments go up and down. This year, we're reducing 2 sections of K-6, which we are increasing the enrollment of those sections, right? So they go from 20 in a classroom to 25, in a classroom. That's a real number. And if those numbers then go up, like, we would have to make adjustments elsewhere. So I think we're kind of at a place where anything that goes in, something has to come out. So just looking at that out year, and again, as you can just follow that pattern, and most of the numbers that we put in, I kind of use relatively conservative growth numbers. We didn't put anything in that were larger increases. We're not anticipating in this scenario that we would have any large facilities needs, which is probable, although I don't know them. So I just kind of put in just very basic growth numbers. Transportation, although I don't have it in here, I was at a meeting with my colleagues today, and the requirement to go to electric buses in New York State is upon us. And even the discussion about, in our quad, about purchasing electric buses, and the cost of electric buses, I think it's either 2.5 times what our current busing is. So they're anticipating about a 30 or 40% increase in busing costs when that mandate is implemented because of infrastructure. I don't have that. No, I do not have it. Because until I want to see if they're going to delay it because I think the infrastructure is not here in southern Westchester. I mean, they had a moratorium on electric up until 6 months ago, and now they would have to, all the bus companies, we have some of our own, but we largely rely on private bus companies. They actually have to put that electrical infrastructure in and purchase the buses, which, but that being said, many of my colleagues are actually putting that in some of their projection numbers because of the concern about the expense of that. So that is, let's just focus on that 25, 26 projection for now. And just kind of, now we'll see on the revenue, because I think this is yes.
So the
Yeah.
projection on the transportation has factored in the possibility of the electric.
It does not.
No. It does not.
No.
Okay.
And it's a mixed bag as to whether to put in, because it is a very big number.
Yeah.
And if you go in too early with it, it throws everything off. I mean, we all ethically, morally, and for the sake of who we are, value it. And then we're into this, the dollar issue. So some have put it in, but again, it's one of those heavy superintendent discussions. I think we're wise right now not to have it in, and it is helpful that we're in a busing consortium. I hate to say it, Weston had its, I gotta speak about my past sometimes. Weston had its own fleet. Had its own fleet, and so it was looking at $15-20 million expense just for the infrastructure, if we went, I'm probably understating it. So, but for us right now, it's wise not to have it in.
Thank you.
And again, I think there's some thinking because it would be impossible to, I think, make the timeframe, and not for us, but just for anybody, so. But again, there are some other wild cards in here that, we don't know. But again, this is just a way to kind of look at our current budget, and again, without knowing, we could, I guess, theoretically have like a drop in some of our expenditures, which does happen also. This, of course, is a model that kind of just shows them going up, but, sometimes we do get some savings. I did calculate into here some of the retirements we're anticipating, so with the retirement incentives we've spoken about with the teachers, that does give us a little breakage in that 25, 26 number, believe it or not. Like I grew the salaries, but reduced what we believe some of those replacement costs will be. So those are factored in here, and that's why I think the numbers are a little bit softer. But I think what's important to then look at, so what the cost is, okay, the budget's going up 4%. What does that mean? And we know we live in a tax cap world, a tax cap state. We know that limits our ability to raise taxes. So this year we did have a growth factor, and what that means is that when we've gone through how the tax cap is calculated for each district, it's unique to each district. Some districts this year only had a 2%, tax cap because they had no growth factor. Others may have had a 5% because they did have a larger growth factor. But for Hastings, our number was 3.19. And at times it's been less than that, and at times it's been more than that. There's times it's been even sub 2% when the inflation number is lower, because it's up to 2% on inflation. So there's times the tax cap in past years has actually been maybe like 1.7. And the reason I bring that up is if a budget is growing at $2 million a year, which I just kind of showed you on the previous slide, but you're only able, if we have no growth factor, which is, we don't always have a growth factor, and what a growth factor relates to is when there's an expanded brick and mortar, which means there's more housing, there's more development, there's more assessed valuation, not a reassessment of like, oh, because your neighbor's house sold for more, but a real like expansion of it could be, sometimes it is picked up on when people do like additions and things on their house. But that number is generated not by us, by the real Office of Real Property Services at the state level, and they have a way of determining what that growth factor is for each individual district, and they provide that to us, and we're required to use it. But as an example, if in fact this year we didn't have enough revenues to balance our budget, right? So what did we do? We took money from reserves because our budget grew by $2 million, but we only were able to raise taxes $1.4 million. So that left us $600,000 that we had to take out of our savings account to balance this budget. We also know that we've been discussing since we've been talking about the budget, that the state budget is not, I think I mentioned this earlier, it's not been approved. They're supposed to deliver a state budget by March 31st. The governor currently has proposed reductions in state funding to districts like ours, significant changes in state funding, which would actually be very harmful to districts like ours, and also districts like Mount Vernon and some of our neighbors would be much more affected by it. But I think that we also know that the state does not have the money, available. So I say that to say that's a revenue we rely very heavily on. And when there is a change, even when we at least get a couple $100,000 increase or, a modest increase, it helps. So this year we, although from a budget to budget standpoint, we are seeing an increase from an actual to what we anticipate receiving, we're seeing a decrease. So we actually receive more this year than we anticipate next year. And that number, though, moving forward, even in that scenario, I factored in that we would get money. I'm like being very optimistic, hoping that we're going to get more state aid in out years. But even with that being the case, if you look at that 25-26 budget, if we're only able to raise 2%, which is possible because I don't know whether we'll have a growth factor or not, even at that median, we would have $1 million shortfall in our budget immediately. And that is still with using 1.2 million out of our savings account. Without that, we would be 2 million in the hole. So I think the growth of the budget and the limitation of the tax cap, we only really have that as a way to generate revenue. We have other revenues that are outlined here, and you can see them, and thankfully, some of them in the last years, we've been seeing a significant increase in what we're receiving. But again, getting a few $100,000 extra in interest income is wonderful. If the interest rate changes, we're not going to be able to, we won't receive that. But it's that limitation of the tax cap that really, it's very difficult because it limits that tax growth to a very small number. I mean, our budget, our payroll is going up more than that number. And that does not include our benefit. That's every reality for every district. So that is what, as Bill said, there's things, sometimes when you have a growth factor or you may have something, you save money on something or other, that then you can kind of add something else in. But I think, we found ourselves this year with many, in addition to what we reduced, we didn't even bring to you all the things that people were asking for. Interventions, special education services, a behavioralist. I think even someone that came up here that we currently have at Hillside that helps with, children on the, not for special ed, but for all children, but they're currently there, and we don't have any of that included. So we're in a very difficult budget time. I mean, it's not terrible because, as I mentioned, there's districts that are really, as Bill mentioned, in really tough times. So I think we're not in a bad time. But this is why, as we consider the current budget, if there's anything that needs to go in, we definitely have to, arguably we should have probably taken more things out, looking at next year, because we're going to find ourselves right out of this budget in a very difficult budget year next year. Because even if we have a growth factor of even similar to this year, we would still be, we would still be shy about $500,000. And we can't, there's no more money, like the reserves that we're appropriating in future years, there can't be any, that's the maximum we should really be using. So I think, that's kind of, that's the thing a lot of people are struggling with. And I think as we all know, everything is very expensive for people in their homes, expensive for us, our energy bills. I'm sure anyone knows Con Ed like I do. I just got notified I used 36% more energy this month for some reason. But everyone knows that Con Ed is, all of the energy costs and things are very expensive, and that's, reflected in our budget. As I mentioned, the insurance industry is both health, retirement systems were up over double digits. So we're, we have everything kind of happening at one time. And, the next couple of years, especially with the state budget, if there's any change in that, we'll really then have to kind of, either do an override, which I'm not suggesting, or make, find ways to be more efficient or, So, that is, I don't know if you have any questions at this point. We have more slides, but any questions in regards to the slides that I've shown you?
I would ask later on.
Okay.
And you got through the new set, right? Is the rest the?
Yeah, so I think everything else is just a reminder of some of the things that we did include in our budget. And as we have mentioned, earlier, because of the running out of the COVID funds, there were many other things we paid through COVID that we just decided not to fund. As I mentioned, we had the behavioralist at Hillside, which is, I think this year going to be about $180,000. So that many things that we were unable to put in. And also we actually funded, we were able to have those lower class sizes the last few years because that was part of the COVID money, was to reduce class sizes. So that's where you see that like change and going back to the higher class size model in our current budget. But this is just, again, things we've gone over, the increases to the budget, also needing additional special ed staff at the middle school was something that, when that came in, something had to come out. Some of, all of these things that went in, that's why we had to, make some of those other changes. And again, the capital work is, I think I have it listed here somewhere. I'm sorry, I'm just flying through these now. Because many of these we went through, but again, I just want to highlight on the capital transfer, we didn't speak much about it at previous meetings. Last year it was 550. This year we did bring that number down to 275. But again, it is critical because as we are, still trying to sort out what we may want to do in a future bond, come next, year sometime, we want to get, a community group together to really unpack that. In the immediate, we do have some issues we need to, address. And we have some very sidewalks everywhere that are not great condition, and we're addressing some of those. And air conditioning, we have air conditioning, as you know, in every location in these buildings, which, we're finding ourselves, there's a few that are not working, new compressors and all the rest to have those work. And we have one or two bathrooms that, because currently some students we would like to have back to the district, we cannot because we don't have the handicap accessibility in many of our bathrooms. So, this is helping us to try to, prepare the building for some students that we anticipate back in the subsequent school year. So those are important capital work. This number originally was about up over $1 million of things we would have liked to have put in, but again, we tried to. But that would have had to come at the expense of other positions, so we did not do that. So I think everything else is, we kind of repeated some of the slides again, the tax cap calculation, because again, we like to keep these in the record, and occasionally if we make updates to this, we would, which we have not. Like as an example, had maybe the information in the state, we would have received more, we may have made an adjustment there, but we have not received anything.
So when you go back to the slide that you.
Yep, this?
Can you, this one is fine.
Okay, we can go on this, okay.
So the debt services.
Yep.
And then the other.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate on it a little?
Sure. So debt service is the money we pay toward the bonds that we have. And that reflects our 2 current bond payments and the interest and the principal and interest payments due on those. And then basically other, I know it's kind of the way it is, it's a catch-all. So as an example, in there you'll have everything from our general liability insurance, which is about $300,000 a year. Our security costs are in there, which are about $450,000 a year. I'm trying to think, let me think about this, like our, I know I was going through some of them before, our BOCEs, like the BOCEs membership for the admin fees, the sewage fees we have to pay to the town of Greenberg, our borderline property taxes we owe to other districts, things like that. But, each of them like 40,000, 50. The big drivers in here are those. And then some of the other things would be, I just want to make sure I'm picking up right, like the contract for all the copiers in the district, which is about $200,000. Things such as that. I mean, it's kind of a catch-all for like all those other type of contractual services required to run the district.
And then the interfund transfer, I know that we do have interfund transfer. Can you elaborate it a little bit?
Sure.
For the community as well?
Yes, of course. So interfund transfer is, I just referred to it on that previous slide. The interfund transfer, there are 2 things that make up those dollars. One of which is the portion of the special ed summer school, children who are required to go to summer school through the Committee on Special Education. The district is required to pay 20% of those expenses. Currently, the state is funding 80% of those. The money, because it has to be transferred out to the federal fund, not accounted for in the general fund, the expenses related to that have to be budgeted in that area of the budget. In addition, capital transfers for things such as a project, a sidewalk repair, a plan, like sometimes we'll do an emergency repair and we'll do that within our general fund budget, but these are like things in which we're aware of and we want to address. So we budget it there and then it gets transferred to a capital fund to be paid for. It's because it's required then to be transferred and then accounted for in there. It's really just the way we have to set up the budget. But there's also in the state, to talk about interfund transfer, in the state proposal, the governor is trying to shift the special education services for students a higher percentage to districts. So, the state's been paying 80%. It can be a large number because it also includes transportation.
they're trying to switch that burden back onto schools. Another big proposal that people are very worried about, all the CPSC costs for students are currently paid for by the county and the state. They're trying to switch, we're required to do some work in that, like in terms of like some of the evaluations or some of the flow-through funds, but largely the expense of that is funded by the state and the county. And part of the governor's proposal is to switch all those liabilities to school districts, which could be like, I don't even know what it would be, but I would imagine if with early intervention, it would be significant. So there's those other things that, again, we're assuming, because I think the governor put a lot in there, knowing that when they, have to negotiate with the legislators, some of those are, I would imagine they'll like back off on. But I think the special one, that one has come up a number of times where they're trying to, because they know that districts make that determination, so I think they're trying to, say, well, like, you should own more of that cost.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Then the other one was the next slide.
Sure.
Which,
Yeah.
okay, so these are the revenue categories
Mhm.
from real estate property is around 9. And I'm seeing some that I'm wondering how we get revenue.
Sure.
The health services, other districts, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and then custodial fees.
Yep.
How are we getting these as revenue? And then there was one more.
Admissions and trips.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
I'm just
so,
wondering
yeah.
how they are revenue.
No, so yeah, so that's a good question. So much of the three that you just mentioned, although we do budget a revenue for them, but they're directly correlated to an expense. So custodial charges and fees for people who use our building beyond our operating hours, it could be rec department. We then have, if it's beyond 4 o'clock on a Saturday, we charge them the custodial fees, but in our actual expenditure budget, we have that expense. So it's really just an offset, but we are required to account for it in this way. Occasionally, when we have something like a movie company or something that rents our space, that actually is like a real revenue, but these are for the most part, just reflecting our expense on the other end of things. Similar with admissions and trips, that is money that either people pay when they come to see a play or students that go on a trip. And then we budget those expenses within our theater budget lines that they kind of, basically whatever monies they generate, they're also spending through the theater budgets.
So admissions means it being admitted to the theater, not getting accepted
Paying the school.
to college.
No, yeah. Yeah, it's actually,
It's a kickback that we get
Yeah.
from,
yeah. But you can see
joking.
where
Yeah.
we're,
The
Public
admissions
meeting.
committee was wondering.
and then board,
Health service.
health services, other districts. So typically, when we had St. Matthew's here operational, which was different because it's not great because you have to provide a nurse, and then you bill back the other districts. If there's children from other districts attending, we then bill back those other districts for those funds. This actually reflects there was a child in a school in the district that had a one-to-one nurse that we had to pay for, and then we billed that district back, but that student is no longer going to be in that school. So right now, we don't anticipate paying for it, nor,
Receiving.
yeah. Well, we have it, actually, do I have it out there? No, I think I dropped it. Yeah, I dropped it because next year, they said they're like going back to their home district.
Question, Maureen, on the revenue. I think we had talked about summer program, kind of use of all the facilities and water and
Yes.
HVAC and all that. Do we have that built into the mix that we recoup that cost?
So we do. I didn't actually put like when I developed the budget, I just put in what we currently have, but those conversations have already happened and we're putting together, it's not in the projection, but I think moving forward, once we determine that number, but we are planning on charging that. I think because it was, at the time when I was first developing the budget, we have already met with the individuals and we explained to them and they said, yeah, that's fine, just let us know what it is. So it's just a matter of, yeah. So what Maureen is alluding to, a lot of, especially as our budgets get tighter, and we've been kind of doing this with a lot of our outside groups this year, and not that we want to like hurt outside programs, but, largely we're like supporting them because there's things like the summer camp, as an example, Great Camp runs at our building, but we running air conditioning for, 7 weeks in a building that we don't run air conditioning, and in those large rooms, the bills are, in the tens of thousands of dollars. It's not, And then also our water bill goes up about $10,000 to $15,000 in that location just for that month for the usage, because, with the hoses and all the rest. So what we are trying to at least establish is we have to be careful for like incurring expenses that have nothing to do with our operations. So especially, with security and all the rest, we've been really, and they've been, every group, I just want to say they've been, wonderful. And they're like, no, we get it, and all the rest. And I said, although it's in the past, maybe we were able to absorb some of it with, air conditioning and all the rest, it's becoming, now it's actually a real, like we're finding that to be a real cost. So we've now asked them to either build it into their fee structure. Thank you. That's a good reminder.
Any other questions, comments?
I don't know if I missed it since I was out for a few minutes. It's actually a slide that you had last time, Maureen. Is it right that you said that the total push-ahead variance, just to keep things running as they are for next year, would be $1.6 million? That's the
Yes.
same? Okay.
And that was
So
actually.
that's just whatever we have now,
Yeah.
because salaries go up and
Right.
contractual obligations
Yes.
go up, insurance.
Mhm.
Doing nothing, we
Yes.
just have an additional $1.6 million of expenses on our books.
Correct.
And we're basically right now navigating in an unknown state aid kind of environment where the state seems to be suggesting that austerity is on the way, and we're definitely regarded as an affluent school district. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
Yeah, no, yes, that's, and I think that as you look in the future years, that's more or less when you look at those rollover budgets. I mean, that was kind of our rollover, and that actually was, some things were even dropping out of that number a bit, even to get to the 1.6. But then we needed to add in this, there's children, like as an example with special ed, if there were aids or different programs that then had to be added on top. So, yes, that was in fact what I said. And I think, again, that unknown, it was wonderful last year when we got the extra 1.5 million of state revenue. Now we're still getting more state aid than we've gotten historically. So I'm still appreciative, but any change in that 200,000 less immediately, well, that's got to come from somewhere, because any reduction in, well, I know you know this, any reduction in revenues has to be made up for in taxes.
Right.
So now, as you said, there's a real concern, because we have lived through when the state has taken back $10 million from us over a 7-year period. And that
And we
actually
know that the
happened.
federal funds that were readily available to us, at least within the past several years, are like poof, they're
Yeah.
gone. So that's not even
No.
a consideration.
And they actually, even some of the grants that we received for years, and I don't know because we haven't seen the actual allocation, but we did get like a notice saying that, so there's special education grants in addition to what we receive that we do get each year. And they're called IDEA grants, right? So even in the title grants, but they are saying because that to anticipate like a reduction of whatever that is, but that's not good because that does pay for something. So it's like, even if, again, if you're getting 400,000 and it goes down by 10%, that's like $40,000 that either we just have to drop or something. So, it's tough too, because we don't have a crystal ball, and typically we have to be very conservative. I mean, I know sometimes people will say, well, you were saying that last year, but you saved money, but that, you have a spending plan in the beginning of the year, and yeah, there are sometimes, especially around special ed, where what's occurring there, sometimes we plan for a student to be somewhere, they don't go, but they may be, this is where you're getting, like on an item, you may say, oh, you only spent X, but what may happen is you may owe that money down the road because maybe the placement is different, and then you will have that expense. So maybe this year, it may appear that you spent less in tuition or something, but it's just that it's really more that it wasn't currently payable, but it will be payable. So I think at times, although most districts, you'd be expecting, as you've heard from auditors, to have some, you have to have some surplus, because that's how every district in New York State has, including New York State, has reserves, is by that surplus. So, but that being said, as we get closer, and I know Jeremy, I don't know if you're watching a lot, no, he used to say, as we squeeze tighter, like he, just like, I think he was very much on that, where he didn't really want us using the reserves because he was like, is it true that if you keep using them, you'll have none? I'm like, yes, that is true. So I think as we can see demonstrated in this chart, things could be better. We get a little more state aid, or things we break in our direction, or we get a little bit more or less here or there. It could be better, but it's still been, every year it's been it's a real challenge to close these budgets because of that tax cap in particular.
One of the things you bring up, it's possible we'll get more state aid.
Yeah.
Because of the legislature's proposals.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, the sort of anti-silver lining there.
We're just speaking to your mic.
sorry.
Sorry, yeah.
You're mentioning that we might get more state aid because of the legislative proposals from Albany, because their proposals are kind of keeping the status quo that we're used to. But sort of the anti-silver lining there, unfortunately, is that, their cumulative spending is an additional $6 billion above what the governor's budget is, and her budget is up quite significantly. So even though it's not a reallocation of existing resources, it's more on top of more, which would be great in a certain sense, but it resembles last year, where it was money that was allocated, but the foundation behind it was not really there, which is why it isn't here this year, so to speak.
Correct. Yeah.
Can you explain it a little bit better?
So, what we're hoping is that, so that the New York State Legislature, their budget proposals are very different from what the governor has proposed, because they restore the funding, they restore a lot of the approaches that support our spending. However, which is great, however, their total budgets are $6 billion larger than the governor's budget. So even though the aim is great, the fiscal foundation is in some ways even worse. And that's its own sort of worry. So, thank you.
No, I think that's a really good point. And the one thing I again, not saying, because, maybe tomorrow they'll come together for a budget, you never know, but I was saying to Bill that, many of people that I know who are actually very, either on, more involved, meaning they're like at the state level, they're on different committees that are like, kind of have more insight, and they said they anticipate that they will not come to a budget agreement, that they're really at a stalemate, and also because of the funding. And I think a lot of people are, coming to terms that they also understand, like in New York, because the only option then would be to significantly increase people's income taxes. And there's like a way they have to learn how to fund it. And I think that's another obstacle for them, as well as there's many things in the state budget outside of the education realm that are being, may be also part of the issue. But there doesn't seem to be, typically they'll say, they should get it together in the next week. But now it seems as though they're further apart than they're acknowledging. And, but I will say, if there were to be $200,000 more in state aid, what we should be doing is not using as much of our appropriated fund balance. We need to hold on to it, because if we don't, we know we're already entering likely into next year with a $500,000 deficit.
Yeah.
I have those.
No, go ahead. I just want to be
Possible,
very simple
yeah.
and clear. If money comes from the state, we need to put it in the reserves.
Especially that insurance
Hopefully, that's a very clear
reserve, yeah.
takeaway, because otherwise, the kind of reductions we'd be thinking and talking about, you don't want to be in that conversation.
With the
Yeah,
chip
next year.
company,
Yep.
yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
No, it's fine. I know this question is not for here, but it's just a surprise to me that they keep referring to Hastings as affluent, and I get it compared to other places we are. But if you look at the same state, and I don't have the data with me here, but I know just before I joined the board, I got that information. The household income to live here is around 300,000 is what they are stating, but the median is less. And so half of the people here, household income is less than that 300,000 that is what is being proposed as, if you live in Hastings, that should be your household income. Half of the people here have less than that because it's median, not average. And so it's just weird that, I'm not sure where they are getting
Well, what they do
that
is, yeah.
determination
yeah.
to say what they are saying
Yeah.
and cutting our
Yeah.
budget.
So
because
the state,
literally-
yeah, but the state, I mean, sorry, but not to interrupt
You
you,
get
but,
what I
no,
mean.
no, I do, and I think the state, that formula, and again, as unfair as it may seem to Hastings, it impacts districts like Yonkers, Mount Vernon, Peekskill, much more so because the way the state determines, state funding, first factor is real property wealth, right? So we are in a, even Yonkers, like compared to even Dutchess County, you could live in like a mansion for, I'm seriously, like my niece's beautiful house, like $400,000. Like it's a very different, even just going from there, you keep going upstate further, 100,000, so even places like Yonkers and Mount Vernon have a huge, it's like 5 times, like, or even maybe even higher, the state average of real property wealth, which again is wealth in itself, right? If you own a home that's more expensive, technically you have more money, right? But then also they take people's, and then they look at the, when you do your tax returns, you write the district in which you live, and they do use those. So again, compared to the state average, but I have seen, there is, actually, there was a recent chart, I have to pull it, and you can see, like you said, the household incomes, and there, I mean, even within Westchester, I think, like, there's some real outliers that are they have so much higher, household incomes than, say, Hastings, like Bronxville, I think is like 5 times, or Scars at 5-6 times. There's like Rye, Armonk, there's some that, I believe in, even though, but in the river towns, I think Hastings, maybe next to Irvington, Hastings had a much higher household income than Dobbs and Ardsley. In terms of like, again, it is an average, but it's just, that's how they do it. But I will say it is in some ways does make sense because districts like Bronxville they barely get state. Like if we're getting 8 million, they get like 4 million. I mean, and they have the same enrollment. So they do like actually give districts less. It's districts like they always talk about, like Yonkers only receives 20% of their budget from the state, but Syracuse, Rochester, and Buffalo are getting 90%. 90% from the state, and they're huge districts. But, I mean, so you look at like even Mount Vernon, which again, only gets about 20%. So we're getting about 15% now, so it's not great, but I think there's only so much money to go around.
We're doing pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we're grateful for what we receive, and I think a lot of it is, there's things in which we have in our budget, and again, as we've talked about at other things, so I'm giving the bad thing, but our budget is also a good amount of money for our size district, and that's the other thing we have to understand, that like there is a piece where it really shouldn't be much higher, because districts of our size, some are a little bit higher, like Irvington is much, much higher, it's a different community, but there are other communities like size to us that budgets are much lower than ours, some very affluent districts, quite frankly. So I think our spending plan, how we have plenty, it's just sometimes we have a lot of things here and it's wonderful, but we've talked about it, we have, more of different things that other districts may not have in some respects, and then other things we may not have, right? We have wonderful, like HAST program, it's a very expensive program. Most districts don't have that program. So there's we can only have so many things, and that's why when you talk about even staffing, and again, we could do a full work session on it. Like we have things that other districts don't have. We have more ICT classes. There are things in which there are decisions that are made, right? We have a significant amount of money we put into our, curriculum with the Courageous Conversation. Teachers, our chairperson model is very expensive. So it's not a criticism, it's just very difficult, but our spending plan, I believe we need to be looking at it because it is a large budget for our size district. And to Bill's earlier point, and to your point, really, people in this community really, there's only a certain amount, so we then have to look at it and say, okay, what are we willing to take out to, if there's other things that need to come in, we have to decide what's coming out. That's really what needs to happen. It can't just be add.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you
Welcome.
very much. Any other questions, comments, clarifications? No? Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Maureen.
Everyone's going to come
So-
depressed.
So from where we sit, just to put a frame on this, you vote on the 16th, that's your next meeting. Maybe I might suggest if you send some questions into the board president that you really would hope we'd address, then maybe we can get them in a systematic way, things you haven't heard, things you'd hope we would address, that also might inform the FAQ a little bit, which, as I mentioned, we will at least have one key question addressed. And the FAQ is a living response format, so we will have one version up on at least the music question, and then have iterations on that, but there may be some other questions you as board members want to send us. Helps us as the administration to kind of get the set, look at them, and figure out how to answer them collectively. And then that's shared out on an FAQ with the community, so it's quite transparent.
Yeah,
So,
I like
all
that.
right?
All right, thank you very
Okay.
much.
Can I just reiterate, again, my only question with the music thing is, how much will it cost when it's a 6? Like how different would the budget look like? Because we all want
Yeah,
the
we'll
budget to
come
pass.
back to that.
I would say about 140, 150,000.
So let's just open the books for the community to see that, 5.2 versus 6, that way we all see.
Yeah, we can put that in as one of the FAQ-related questions in music.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I switched up the agenda. I don't know if you noticed, Kai, but I put you next.
Yeah.
So if you need a couple warm-up seconds, take them.
Okay.
Welcome. Yeah, it's okay.
So before I begin officially, I just want to say thank you to those of you who are remaining who spoke in the public comment section. All of that was really impactful. I know that Eliana spoke on this quite eloquently last week, so I'll keep my section brief, but I have been a part of the Hastings music program since 3rd grade. I've played the viola in every orchestra I can, and I'm one of the founding members of the klezmer group Hudson.
That's right.
The education that I've received in music has impacted me so strongly. I am currently the first chair violist in the highest level symphony orchestra at French Woods, which is the summer camp that I go to that's very oriented strongly towards the arts. So that's been a very big achievement that I owe entirely to the music staff here at Hastings, people like Miss Concra all the way back in the elementary school, Mr. Carini, Mr. Day, Mr. Riss, all of them have really helped me on this musical journey that I hope to continue through college and beyond. So just wanted to put that out there, that my heart resides with the music program. So on to official business. Our dear Eliana could not be here this evening, so this is going to be just a lot of my voice, but we've got some ground to cover. It's been a little while. So it feels like forever ago now, but the Alvin Ailey Dance Company came to Hastings in the week before break, and they gave this wonderful presentation. There were so many dancers that came from all over the world. They went around and shared where they were from. It was really incredible to see this vast spread of countries represented on the Hastings stage. Every single one of them was so talented and really kind too. So both the high school and middle school got to watch this wonderful performance, which was filled with all sorts of different dance styles, different genres of music, and we got some like history lessons in there too, which was really cool. So massive thanks to all of them for taking a day and showing us all their skills. As I'm sure we all know, spring break has just come to its close, most unfortunately. I know everyone was so happy and thankful for that week off, but of all the stories of the break I've heard, I gotta say, the Latin classes trip to Italy, that's gotta take the cake. They went to Rome, they got to experience all this great history, all this cool architecture. They didn't get to speak Latin all that often, it being a dead language and all. But I heard that the food was better than anyone has ever tasted. So that sounded amazing. I'm quite jealous. The juniors, including myself, are currently going through our National Honor Society applications. So everyone in our grade with a GPA above a 90 received an invitation to apply, and from there we've had to fill out information about leadership skills, our integrity, social service, all sorts of stuff. Just to add to that application stress, the PL applications are due in the same week, although I will say one of my friends just texted saying that it might be pushed back, so we're gonna keep our fingers crossed for that one. This year for PL, there are almost 50 applicants, which is nearly half the size of our grade, so it's really just goes to show how impactful this program is. We're currently filling out the written portion, which will then transfer into in-person interviews with both teachers who run the program and the current peer leaders. And past that, the final 24 will be selected. One of my favorite senior traditions has just started today, which is the Senior Assassins. So this is a tradition where the seniors are assigned targets and they have to shoot them with a water gun. If you're hit, you're out. But if you're holding the designated safety objects, then you can't be out even if you're hit. These safety objects get increasingly ridiculous, eventually culminating in most of the surviving seniors carrying around a watermelon through the halls of the high school. So needless to say, I am very excited to watch this all pan out. Adding on to the senior class happenings, the senior internships are beginning to take off. So students are finding locations where they can intern for the month of June, and they'll be learning about any subject that strikes their fancy. So towards the end of the year, they'll come back to the school and they'll present to various classes on what they've learned over their time. Moving into some theater updates, the Broadway Training Center's senior show, A New Brain, went up in the Hastings Theater just before break started. So it was a huge success. There were families and friends from a whole bunch of the river towns that came to see and support the cast and the crew that were involved. And don't worry if you missed it, because the next BTC show opens on Friday the 19th. So keep your eyes peeled for some posters. Speaking of wonderful theater programs, our very own high school musical Urinetown opens on Friday the 12th. Cast and crew are practicing ceaselessly to present this amazing show that will no doubt blow us all away. So break a leg to everyone involved and be sure to check it out. The Student Union is currently working on preparations for Spirit Week, which will culminate in our spring pep rally. Spirit Week is a little different this year, beginning in Thursday and continuing into the following week, with pep rally being on Wednesday the 17th. There are some, conflicts. But we're planning lots of new activities this year, including one for the teachers, so I'm feeling the pep. Just around the corner is the long-awaited solar eclipse. In an effort to promote safety around the peak of the eclipse, which occurs just around the time when school gets let out, the district is providing special glasses to all of the students and teachers. And if you don't have a great place to watch, the library is having an eclipse viewing that afternoon, which is Monday the 8th, if you're not aware. Just after that, on Friday the 12th, is a much less enjoyable event, the ELA state test for all middle school students. So best of luck to them, but I would personally trade my upcoming APs for that test any day of the week. The last Friday of the month, the 27th, is the FMS Science Fair. So this fair has been an ongoing collaboration between both the middle school competitors and the high school science research students who have been going into the middle school and mentoring all of these kids. They have a lot of experience when it comes to science fairs, so it's been really cool to be able to pass down some of that information, and really great to engage with younger students who are super interested in science. And my last thing, but certainly not least, I want to wish a huge, huge, huge congrats to Justin Baldessari and Miles Hamilton for making it to the International Science and Engineering Fair for their science research projects. This is huge, and having 2 students from our school is really, really incredible. So they're going to be going all the way across the country to present again in front of students from all over the world and judges who will see what they've got. So yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's quite an update.
Yes.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much.
Of course, thank you.
Can you tell me a little bit about what the peer, I know to some extent, but the peer leaders in terms of peer mentorship?
Yeah, definitely. So the peer leaders are a group of 24 seniors. Typically, in the past, it's been 12 boys and 12 girls, but I think they're trying to do away with the gender label. And each of them take on a group of the freshmen. So the entire freshman class is divided up into these 12 groups, and they're usually, depending on class size, I know my group was around 10-ish people. So they meet at lunch once a week, I think it's Thursdays, and the peer leaders talk to their group of freshmen, and there's all sorts of fun activities and stuff. A lot of it is just for the freshmen to be able to have a friendly face in the hallways that they can wave to and that they know will recognize them, because it's a big school, a new environment is scary. I know my peer leaders were so welcoming and inviting, so I think it's really forming that sense of community and really trying to connect the newer members of the high school with some of the ones who've been here for the longest.
Thank you.
Of course.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Free to stay and or go. Your choice. Thanks again. All right, moving on, we're going to turn to Dr. McCursey for any district highlights that you'd like to pull out from.
Sure. In the written record for the board and the community is my report. Let me just mention one thing that's not on there. This week is Assistant Principal Week. Yeah,
That was hilarious.
they're laughing because I sent a video around to the entire leadership team of me waking up from a nap. I said basically what I do is sleep here because they're so good, the assistant principals, I can just sleep all day. So I sent that video around to the leadership team. I did share it with the board because I am their one employee, so I need to let them know that I'm napping. But most importantly, let me thank Melissa Hardesty, Camilla Dawkins, and Mike LaRocco. In the video, I thanked them repeatedly, but let me just, less is more here. They are wonderful, hardworking, devoted, dedicated, and they truly are a team connected in many ways. Districts, believe it or not, even as small as this, struggle with the silo effect, i.e. there's a school there, a school there, a school there, they never connect. I do know from the roundtables I did, which were incredibly valuable, I've referred to them a lot, that was a concern of a number of people, students, parents, and families, staff, about our silo effect. It is not that walled off, if you will, because particularly if you witness the APs, they connect a lot and they help each other a lot. We can always get better, as they will say, but I want to take a moment there. The other is, it's important to know, is Lou DiPietro would want me to say, we are planning very clearly and definitely for the arrival of Mr. Clayman. He was on campus for 2 full days, very full days, interacting with students, faculty, staff, in small settings purposely. Mr. Hardesty did a wonderful job organizing it, working with Melissa D. a lot, as well as the PTA and SEPTA. The second gathering for PTSA SEPTA, I think we probably had about 40, 45 parents there for a conversation with Mr. Clayman, and it was a real plus. And he did say the following, and I will read it. I deeply appreciate the warm welcome extended by family, students, and staff. My brief visits underscored what I had already learned about Hastings, that it is a supportive community dedicated to providing an excellent educational and co-curricular experience for all students. I'm excited about our work ahead and looking forward to joining the community soon. And let me final point here. Technically speaking, he will coordinate with Lou on any of, excuse the first names, just sometimes it helps, any of the hiring, new staff, new administrators for the high school. They'll work well together. Any of the crossover appointments, Andy will work very closely with Scott. Ultimately, I have to make decisions. Some of these may come to you as a board, some are at the administrative level, but I want to assure you that we're thinking through very carefully and clearly what's happening over the next several months and into about halfway through next year as it relates to this critical addition. The rest of my report, Kai, you must have read it, or I read yours, because it was very much the same, and you delivered it much better than I ever would. So thank you.
You flatter me.
Well, deservedly so.
All right, thank you, Dr. McCursey. Moving on to highlights from Dr. Szymanski.
So I'd like to begin by reiterating the music FTE update that I provided at our last Board of Education meeting, and also adding to it based on some of the comments that alluded to certain things. So I just want to be very explicit about those things here with my update as well. So last spring, we recognized the retirement of a member of the music faculty. That same member was promptly hired back as a .6 with the understanding that anticipated projections in enrollment and scheduling would not necessitate this staffing for the 24-25 school year. As we entered the budget planning process, we revisited the staffing for the music department, and we looked at needs with John Carini, a music department chairperson this year, the building principals, and Jeanette Coker, director of school counseling, who handles a lot of the scheduling, and that was engaged in through collaborative planning process. All have remained student-centered, and all have remained very passionate and committed to the excellence of our music program. Following our recent Board of Education meeting, we looked closely into some concerns raised during the public comment period. We revisited both our music program offerings and how students were being scheduled for those offerings. Within the last couple of years, the middle school reallocated the 7th and 8th grade general music position to provide chorus and instrumental music opportunities for all fifth graders. So they shifted that FTE at the middle school level. So while we now have more robust opportunities for our fifth graders, the need remains to provide some general music in either 7th or 8th grade for students who are not participating in an ensemble, chorus, band, or orchestra, to be able to meet the music requirement if they are not in an ensemble. And again, that was resulting from a shift that was made at the middle school for scheduling to make a more robust 5th grade program. So rather than reducing the full .6 music position, we will reduce the position by .4. This will result in a .2 position to ensure that we can both maintain the full fidelity of our current music offerings and also provide general music classes to middle school students who will need that music requirement. And then by the end of the week, as Dr. McCursey referenced, we'll be posting a more comprehensive FAQ document, and there likely will be iterations of that, outlining our current 23-24 music offerings and also showing the concurrent 24-25 music offerings, which will remain consistent. There is one exception, I noted that earlier, which is rather than 2 sections of high school chorus, 1, and that is purely based on enrollment needs. That is purely based on numbers. And as in years past, AP Music Theory is also based on enrollment. That will currently, it's projected to run, but like every year, we look to see if there are enough students to run it. So I'll be providing some more information in FAQ to show the consistency and to be really specific about what we're offering. Okay?
How many students do you need to run a second?
I'm not
class?
sure. I'm not sure. We take a look at what runs, what doesn't run. Currently, it looks like we'll have enough to run it. Yeah. Okay, I do want to add to what Kai said about the Italy trip, the Latin trip to Italy. And I'd like to just expand upon that a little bit more. So yes, we had 15 Latin students, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, traveling to Italy. Again, the students went to Sorrento, Naples, and Rome. The itinerary was very robust. It kept everybody moving, dawn to dusk. And the Sorrento agenda included a hydrofoil to cross the Bay of Naples to Capri. And this water is particularly famous for being rough, and we felt that. A tarantella dance lesson, a visit to a mozzarella farm. We went to Pompeii, and it was absolutely torrential downpour rain, and everyone championed through that. It was really remarkable. The learning continued. In Naples, students visited Herculaneum, hiked Mount Vesuvius, took a guided tour of the Naples Underground to dive into many layers of history. The visit to Rome began with a tour of the Colosseum. Other highlights included a stop at the Capuchin crypts, the Pantheon, and Piazza della Rotonda. And throughout the entire adventure, the accommodations and the food were incredible. And while they were not speaking a lot of Latin, they were certainly reading and discussing a lot of Latin and thinking about historical impacts all throughout. I would like to acknowledge that our students were absolutely remarkable. And every single challenge that was encountered, they were collaborative in problem solving their way through. They were graceful. Some of them grew 10 years within 3 days in terms of their level of independence. Cell phones were away at the tables, and there was lively discussion. People were even waiting ultimately for the whole table to be plated before they started being served, before they started eating. If they were asked to be somewhere at 6 in the morning, they were there at 6 in the morning, and they took that upon themselves to be there at 6 in the morning, despite having raised their hands. Many of them usually have an assist at home for a wake up, and they just handled it. I want to acknowledge that our guide was wonderful, deeply knowledgeable, also a teacher, so it was really fortuitous that we had this particular experience. And special thanks to Magistra Ellen Driscoll, whose preparation and trip facilitation were truly flawless. She should write a manual of how to prepare for these things. And Madam Chalmers attended. Her calming influence and steady guidance were fully appreciated. And if you have never had the opportunity to run or sprint through an international airport with 15 students, lots of luggage, and 3 minutes to connect to get back into the country, you have never lived. So phenomenal adventure, and much kudos to our World Languages Department, and especially Ellen Driscoll,
Wow.
and our students.
Wow.
Thank you. That's lovely. I want to rewatch it later.
Melissa, can you remind me what the criteria was for students to participate in that? I know for the Spanish trip to Merida, it was for upper division level students. So I'm just wondering, was it a numerical, since it was 15?
It was.
Okay.
It was not, there was not a cap at 15. There was a requirement that they were either sophomores, juniors, and seniors.
Okay.
And I know that Madame Chalmers is planning for a trip to France next year. It was originally open to juniors and seniors, but after having been on the excursion and seeing how the sophomores rose to the occasion, she just opened it to the sophomores as well. So it really was very special. And I have to say, when you think about authentic learning opportunities for students in the portrait, they were fully immersed, and they were asking so many questions and really taking what they learned. And I had the opportunity to go into the Latin classes when we got back and hear about the instruction, just geographically, and thinking about why the water might be so rough, and lessons on salt, and having been in it and feeling the churn, and then the connections, the interdisciplinary connections to earth science and NaCl, and working through all of the chemistry that was involved. It was really phenomenal, and I'm so impressed by our students, and it was just really a pleasure that they had this opportunity.
I'm sure Mr. Nguyen and Ms. Bromberg would also have some war stories to share with you about running through a Houston airport
Yes.
to catch flights
Yeah.
back to New York as well. So,
Yeah, so running shoes are a criteria. for
exactly.
it.
Apparently, for chaperones.
I have sorry, I'm going to take you, I promised I'll ask this question and I forgot. I'm going to take you back to the music situation. So when it comes to, you mentioned something about enrollment, which is really a very real thing. Individuals need to fill up their schedule accordingly, and so this is a technical question. So when it comes to the type of music classes that are being offered, is it set in stone in terms of, let's say, if an instrument is upright bass and you don't have enough enrollment, can it be switched to electric, where people are more interested in electric bass? Is it like, is the music curriculum or instruments or all those things set in stone in such a way that they can be altered to attract more? I mean, I think there could be, in terms of the department thinking of what students may be interested in, but I just said I have to ask this from.
So interestingly, Mr. Carini and I were just talking about that today. So certain instruments are more attractive to students. They tend to self-select into certain things. And so we really do want to differentiate and honor what students' interests are. The trade-off to that is you get a little bit of an imbalance, right? And, you know, so that's something that our music departments handles, and they handle it gracefully. So they don't require, so the short answer is no, we don't cut them off from doing it. And at the same time, there may just be some singleton instruments because they may be bigger, they may be heavier, certain instruments may be more popular, and so they work through that. The music department has self-scheduled their lessons, so thinking about those groupings. And then in terms of how it is functionally, then they are woven into the ensemble.
Okay. The only reason why I brought this up, and that was the response I thought it was, but I just wanted it to come directly from the operational team. The reason why I brought this up was because of especially these individuals that brought this to my attention, that it's meeting up with enrollment. And if there are no people, then we don't need to have the class. And so it was just like, well, if you're asking people to play talking drums and they're not interested in that, so they won't take it, so there will be low enrollment.
So I think
So I just wanted to throw that out there.
it's a fair question, and, I think, things have been brought up to me about certain things, like from before I got here, for example, like there was the steel drums, and when I asked the question prior, like what happened with that, my understanding is that the expertise of the current staffing, in terms of instructionally, that is a very niche area, and so, that's the only thing I'm aware of. Other than that, AP Music Theory is running this year with only 6 students, and that was a decision, right, to make sure that we run it. But we keep an eye on those types of things.
Thank you.
Let me just reiterate, because on this music piece and on the FAQ, that'll be the first and major focused area coming out Friday. And for the board, we conduct our meetings in public, so I'm speaking to you. But we have received a lot of input, again, as I mentioned earlier, more broadly. I was not in my earlier comments speaking specifically about music, but only do that here. I'm insisting on seeing the numbers. I mean, Maureen and Melissa know that. John Creaney and I have talked about that. I need to see the numbers. The record shows I get to a lot of the performances. I care deeply about the performances. I've been lucky enough only to be around primary and secondary schools that value music very highly. Started at North Mount Herman, and if you go look at their resume on music, it's phenomenal. I just was lucky enough my whole career, that's where I've been and I care about. I wouldn't have been hired in Greenwich as superintendent when they were building the Performing Arts Center if I hadn't said, yeah, I'm deeply committed to what was then, maybe people know, $42 million Performing Arts Center built with rehearsal spaces and all the rest, now probably worth about 80. I wouldn't have gotten the job if I hadn't committed. So I would not, be bringing still to the board this adjustment if I wasn't convinced for next year we were going to provide the exact same level of programming that we've been providing, and through the next year evaluate that and figure out where we are. It's not dissimilar to the first and fifth grade situations, those rising fifth and first grade. So I'm going to insist on seeing the numbers. We'll put those out. We'll be very visible about the enrollment numbers and use real numbers in terms of, the number of children in music. So your question's a good one, Dr. Lang, and what that means to the staffing, and also to make sure that we are fully optimizing the staff we have, that their assignments and work is where their expertise and match is, and that it's that full-time relationship, and to support them in that. But we have to make sure that we're optimizing. But you can be assured from me, and you need to hear it, board, that I am deeply committed to music here and the performing arts in all ways. And like in a lot of areas in the district now and over the next several years, we're going to face some tough decisions. We have to hold on to the best of our programs and the best of our staff to deliver that. So we'll look at the numbers, we'll bring those out to you, you'll see those in a couple weeks, you'll vote, and we'll see where we are. But I'm committed to high-quality programming in music and to make sure we work through this current set of deliberations, discussions, and again, highly respectful input from the community, which is critical to how we function in a small d democracy.
Thank you. Question?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of make sure I understood. So the current proposal on the table is not to take away the .6, but to take away .4 of that. So that's a change from last time. right?
Originally, we were taking the .6 with the understanding that we didn't need the .6. When we looked into one of the comments that was made further, and we went down the rabbit hole to really dig and see how kids were being scheduled and what it was exactly they were taking, we did find that there is a need for students not in ensembles to 7th and 8th grade to make sure that they get their music credit. And so we do need to restore a .2 to be able to offer that, which means it is a .4 reduction, not a .6 reduction.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No? Moving on.
Oh, and can I just add one quick thing? The .4 reduction, I just want to be very clear on why. .2 of that .4 is due to fewer classes in terms of like enrollment trends. So we don't need to schedule them for music because those classes don't exist. We have fewer classes. The other .2 is that there is availability to schedule in a music staff member's schedule. So that's the .4 part. So availability in the schedule, and also the other .2 is due to decreased enrollment naturally. So we're staffing the same level, like to make sure things are flat. We're staffing to meet our actual needs.
So are you saying then that the only thing that would be changing in terms of music offerings would be that one class?
Correct.
For which there is an enrollment?
Correct, and that one section of chorus rather than two, again, based on enrollment. Yeah, numbers.
And that'll be reflected in the data that we're talking about?
Yes.
We'll share all
It'll be
that.
there.
There'll be plenty of chance for you to look at it,
Yep.
come back, talk with us about it, obviously share it in the public.
How will we evaluate if this setup for next year is working?
Well, I think we can be bringing you regular updates. I think part of the concern here is the ratio of music teacher to student. So I think you'd be looking at those ratios across the various ensembles, groups, classes. I think very important here, a lot of districts, given the financial picture I shared, would not be offering some of the advanced APs. When you have 5 or 6 students in AP, it's gone. It's not offered. We're offering it. So I insist on that because we have students who've come up the ladder, and that's across the board for us in high school. It's not only a music issue at this point. And that may be a future discussion for you. I mean, I had that discussion in Greenwich, I had in Weston. I got to name where I've worked. But we decided, a student starts early here and they're anticipating that opportunity, and you don't want to take it away if you can. So I think that's some of the important things I really want to emphasize here is our commitment to providing all of those opportunities. So having said that, we will look at enrollment questions. Who's involved? How many are there? Are we providing that? I was in the auditorium when that 5th grade performance was there, and I was in the 5th standing row of adults. I was one of the few non-parents in the place, right? But they were family members. The place was rocking and committed and packed for the groups on that stage. And so I have eyes on some of those concerns, and we want to watch that and see that. Does that get beyond what our talented teachers can handle? And we sort of look at all that very carefully. So a lot of words, but to bring it down to numbers of students involved relative to the number of faculties, talking a lot and working with John Carini. And as I want to be clear, nobody loves the idea we have to do this, but if you think about our entire budget, you see how it fits in, right? It's fitting where we have to be, meet the needs relative to the students and keep those programs there. But John's been wonderful working with us to sort through how we best manage this. So I can trust John Carini to be very clear with us on what is or isn't working and how we think about it. So I don't know if that's a helpful, so we owe it to the board, we owe it to the community, most importantly, we owe it to the students to be tracking, understanding, explaining.
Dr. McKessie, I have 2 things that I want to just clarify for myself. So I know for a fact that we have to fill out a schedule. That's contractual obligation that needs to get done. That I get it. So that's what I know there is that kind of scheduling piece, right? The second part that I want to get some level of clarification is when it comes to, I'm not a music person, but there are certain courses, if I may use higher education as an example, even under biology, like ecology, that the class size has to be small because of the work that gets done. So anatomy and physiology, I can have 600 students in an auditorium lecture, but the lab size has to be 24 because of what is being done. So my specific ask is that when it comes to music, the class size, is it supposed to be the same as the regular classes, or that follows a different scale of
I mean,
class
it's
size?
going to vary on
instrument.
the level. I mean, for example, in the 5th grade, given all of the 5th graders are in the different, that's going to affect whether you're later in the cycle here, further up the grades in terms of you're choosing more as to what might be the general ed requirement at either 7th or 8th grade. It's not both years. In one of those 2 years, we need to get that back in. So that may be a different enrollment thing, but we'll have all that charted out. We'll chart it out by each of this year's courses offerings, everything from the Schedule Bs, which as we know are separate from the core, the core, listing all of those, what the enrollment is, and then we'll list what the anticipated enrollment is for next year relative to the tentative teachers. And so that will give great, I mean, we want to be super clear on this. And as I said at the up top, I need to know that we can do this without undercutting what we're doing for our students.
Thank you.
But it'll be there, and you've got time to look at it, the community will look at it, and we'll have more time to react.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill.
Can I just make, can you hear me?
Oh,
yeah.
my gosh.
Hi, guys.
Are you here? No, we can't see you.
You're good, you're good.
She's hidden behind the thank
It's
you.
like the voice of God, you know?
Like you're, I'm
Wizard
either
of
the
Oz.
devil or the angel back in your.
Totally Wizard of Oz.
Oh, there you are.
We see you now.
You can keep it off after this. I just wanted to make one comment about the trips. I'm thrilled about the trips. I'm super in support of it. When I was a freshman in high school, I went to Spain. I still remember it. It was very formative. My daughter is taking French, and we just got the information about the French trip, which I would love for her to go on, but the cost is $4,300, which I get that those things are expensive, I get that, but it's exorbitant, and it's not just for, you know, that like people who have less means can't pay for it, like regular people, that's really hard. And I know that Aliana's already said that some of her, you know, she's talked to her friends, and some of them can't go simply because of the cost, and it must feel really bad for those kids when the other kids come back and talk about how amazing the trip was, and that they couldn't go on it because their parents couldn't afford it. I don't know what the answer is. I recognize that things are expensive. I was shocked, frankly, by the $4,300. I never thought it would be that much money for a week's trip. I get it, but I don't know if there's things we could do. Is this something that we could look to fundraising? Maybe Hef can, you know, we can talk to Hef about grants that can help other students. I know if kids really have no means, then they can get help for it. I'm sure that there's scholarships involved. But it's the kids who are kind of in the middle, a middle-class parent who, like, you know, could have the money, but it's really hard. And so, you know, that's just my comments there. It's an amazing opportunity. I would love for all of our kids to go. It's just not possible, I think, for so many of them to have this opportunity. And I don't know what the answer is, but I'd love to see if we can try to figure it out in some way.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more with that. We're trying, and we're trying to figure it out. And so I do know that the tour company is offering some offset with a scholarship. I have to figure out, you know, with the World Languages team, like what that looks like. It's not substantive, but it's something. I also know that they offer an early registration discount, I believe. And then, in addition, thinking through some fundraising, there may be a way for us to, you know, I believe, and I defer to Maureen on this, we're obligated, any fundraising has to be open to everybody. Like, it has to be open to everybody. It has to, however, it doesn't mean everyone has to accept it. So there might be a way that we offer it to everybody, and then those who reply that they need, you know, confidentially, we can kind of navigate that. But we have to do it equitably, right? Is that right?
Yeah, we actually got into an issue years ago with this, because you do have to make it open. So when it's open, it's open. So anyone who meets that criteria, like, say, if Sylvia's point, then it has to be, so anyone who needs a scholarship then has to be provided it. And that's why districts can't do it, because you cannot, or, you know, like it now, if I'm like, I can go for free, like now you have multiple people. That's why they stopped doing the trips like Frost Valley, which my older children went to, and Philadelphia and all the rest, because what was happening is the PTSA was on, they were having to give us like $25,000 a year, like legit on like lower cost, you know, trips. So this is why we went away from doing the trips abroad years ago. Jody was on the board at that time, because there was, you know, just realistically, it's impossible. Because what was happening is there was some one-off scholarships given, but the idea was that the parents of all the students taking those world languages were not told that if there was an opportunity, but those trips are expensive, and if, you know, to raise like $50,000, $80,000, $100,000 is not realistic, you know what I mean? It's just not.
So Maureen,
Yeah.
I get the restriction with the district fundraising, but I also know that students fundraise for their prom and different things. So if I've said this here before, sorry. I've said this here before, that there are ways in which the students can do a fundraiser similar to what they do for their prom stuff, that the confidentiality still is maintained, and students that actually need the help get the help. Whether it's fundraiser through organizations like Doreen mentioned, HEF, PTSA, businesses, whatever it is.
But
it's,
but I would just say, well, remember, they have charters and how they raise money. HEF cannot raise money and give it to individual students.
Correct,
And once
correct.
the money comes into our coffers, we're required to do it in an equitable process that is a legal process.
Correct.
And it can't be arbitrary, and there are things, I mean, we have people, even currently, which, you
So
know,
I'm
we get
not-
requests all the time for people who aren't, they may say, well, I make certain money, but I can't afford, you know, there is some discretion, but when we send out a form for a trip, it says every student, regardless, you know, can
So
go.
I get that part. I get that part.
But we
and
have
I'm
to
not
build that
arguing-
in, so,
I'm not
yeah.
arguing with you on that part. I get that part. But
Mhm.
I know that students can also fundraise for big sale and all those things.
No, they can do that,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the part that you cannot do.
Right,
which
but I'm saying
res-
these outside organizations, and that's what, like when PTSA did for years, for those 8th grade trips, which were probably $600 a person or whatever they were, they started to provide that, but what was occurring is the amount, say if there was 150 students, we were getting maybe 70 requests for scholarships. And not full, but then there was a requirement to do it, you have to have some criteria, it can't be like, well, it is tricky, it's
So
not
let
easy.
me ask a very specific question. So let's say that the students decide to partner with the youth council.
Yeah,
and
they could do
a-
that.
Exactly, that's what I mean. They're
Outside of us, yeah.
Outside, that's what I'm trying to say. This is a small community. They decide to partner with the youth council and do a big sale at the farmer's market, trips for this. And then people can write checks, whatever it is, and they accumulate the money. Then their chaperone or that person that knows the parents that can afford 4,300 and those that cannot afford, they work within it. So I mean, that's one of the greatest thing about Hastings that some of us fell in love with, because apart from the school community, there is what? The community. And I feel like if there's restriction from your end, absolutely, because I remember when we were trying to do the HEF thing, then you can't force something that you cannot do. But I think that there are other ways in which the students can fundraise money on behalf of their colleagues who may want to go, but it's not possible for them. So that's what I wanted to put out there.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to business items. There's just two this time. Are there any questions on business items 1 or 2? No?
Excuse me.
One, I forgot, it had an acronym, and I read it quickly, but CB something, CBIZ?
CBiz.
CBiz,
Yeah.
what is that exactly?
They value, they come in and they do an evaluation of our fixed assets, and they provide us the reports. We're required to do it for both insurance purposes as well as our financial statements, so they provide that service.
Okay, got it.
It's actually, the reason we pay so low is because our insurance does pay like for some of the service, or else, because it's a significant report we receive.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Is there a motion to approve business items 1 and 2? Is
So moved.
there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Thanks, Guy. Thank you.
Thanks, Guy.
Thank
Are there any questions or comments about our placement services for CSE and CPSE? No? Is there a motion to approve our placement and services for CSE and CPSE? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Personnel will be voting as a consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments regarding our appointments, amendments, or retirements?
I mean, I guess I'd like to say there's several people here who've had long service to the district. We're thankful to them. There's a few that I could comment on personally just because I've worked with them. The fact that we're losing Joanne Cipollina, who's been in the nurse for such a long time and who's so wonderful every time you talk to her, and who made her way through COVID.
Yes,
I mean,
that's what I was thinking.
just, there's a special place in heaven for her. Ms. Kikuchi, I know, has been in the counseling department, providing administrative support to the people so that they can deliver excellent services to our students. So, a debt of gratitude for one kid who's off in college and another who's on his way. Ms. Hardesty, there aren't words enough to say the service that she's given to our students through the high school. She's just a wonderful mix of directness, down-to-earthness, and somebody that kids really, on the graduation stage, always give a shout-out to her for what she's meant to them. So those are just 3 folks that I happen to know a little bit more, so I feel comfortable making personal statements about them. But every time, we have a retirement, we feel sadness to lose them, but we're happy for them to move on to a new phase in their life. So thank you, even to those that I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just piggyback on Sylvia. When I look at the list of people, and similar to some of yours.
Jody, use your mic.
Similar to some of, I don't have a voice, but similar to some of the people that Sylvia mentioned, I actually remember when Lisa Addipietro first started working here, and it's sort of lovely that she became a part of the community, and obviously not unpredictable timing for her resignation, but and Melissa has given an incredible amount of heart and soul, as has Jeanette Coker, has really worked incredibly hard and been such an incredible part of that team. And I also want to, I don't know everybody here, but I do want to also acknowledge the 2 people in Joe's shop, Nick and Midio, who I think we often, I don't know that we do this, but I was going to say we often forget about it. I think we do very much recognize the importance of the people who are part of our facilities and maintenance crew. I think they do an amazing job.
Day in, day out during storms when no one else is here, and they notice
Exactly.
the things that go wrong in the buildings because they're on the premises when all of us have the luxury of being at home. And again, especially a shout out to those folks because they were here during COVID, and there aren't words to say all the things that they had to do to keep things up to snuff, spick and span, just stamping out the calamity that everybody was feeling on a day in and day out basis. So truly, and again, as you said, Jeanette Coker, thank you so much for the cohesion that you brought to the department. And everybody here will be missed, so.
Yeah, thank you. And just to note, we will have another chance at the end of the year to acknowledge and celebrate their service here. So thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments regarding appointments, amendments, retirements?
Let me just technically note here for the board, all of these are significant departures for us, significant retirements. 2, because of their leadership role. I do need to put a notice out tomorrow. That'd be regarding Ms. Hardesty and Ms. Coker, just because those are seats that really people are concerned, how are we going to fill them? And so I have a statement out. Assuming you vote on this tonight, the statement will say that tonight that their retirement was approved, if you will, by the board, and give a little statement on each of them, but then make it very clear we're going to immediately start the search process with both of them retiring December 31. Andy Clayman is well aware of this. He's been in the loop as Lou wanted and all the rest, so he's very clear on this, and he would be active with Lou and others. Scott Wynn, particularly around Jeanette Coker's replacement, be very active in bringing recommendations forward. And the scheduling is a giant piece for us, so as often happens with some retirees, if we have any sort of carryover issues, we may stay in touch with Jeanette on that. So there's a lot of planning underway, most importantly for our students and staff, faculty, so we minimize, I can't guarantee 100%, but we minimize any slip-ups or whatever during the transition. So I just want to emphasize that right now. And I've written to each one of them individually, but there will be the public statement on about 2, just because their positions really require a district-wide statement.
And I'm glad to hear, Bill, that the way that you're including Andy in the searches and in the hiring. Obviously, it's nothing that we don't know about how important it is for people to be able to work together, but I think in people's concerns about filling shoes and what the transition is going to be like, I think, I think we have to recognize what an incredible team Lou and Melissa have been in terms of how they work together and respect each other and rely on each other. And I know for me, it's been sort of a pleasure to watch both of them kind of grow in their roles and totally just come into their own. I could remember when each of them were hired, and but thinking of the two of them together, it's so important, particularly in a small high school like this. I know Kai said that it's a big school, but it's really not a big school, right?
No.
Really not,
No.
right? But I think that it's just so key.
I want to both assure and compliment. So the assurance would be for everyone that Lou has been incredibly generous on this, and the compliment is to Lou for being incredibly generous. And now Melissa Hardesty has been incredibly generous and forward-looking. And I've worked lots of places, only great places. Here's another great place. Even in great places, key people leaving, they leave before they left, if you get my point. These two are not. They are rolling up their sleeves and making sure the transition is what, and again, fundamentally what our students and families need. So.
It's great to hear. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jody.
There you go.
Is there a motion to approve our appointments, amendments, and retirements?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Minutes, these would be from our March 19th board meeting. Are there any questions or comments? So a motion to approve our minutes from the March 19th meeting.
So
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to second public comment. Should there be anybody who wishes? No? Sure. Hello again.
Hi, ready to reintroduce myself.
I don't even know, to be honest.
Mic.
Oh, the mic, I'm sorry.
Hi, more questions than comments. As you're preparing the FAQ, I have two questions that I wanted to put before. One is, if you could explain a little more about the .2 TE position that you're proposing. Who is that? How is that hired? Is that in addition to the current teacher's load? Just how would that work? And then I'm curious to learn more about the estimate for replacing Mr. Rubino's position, particularly if there were options to hire a more junior teaching faculty to replace a more senior person. So the number that was quoted sounds very high, and so it would just be really great. I think the community would be really interested to get a little more detail in those numbers. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good questions.
Hi there.
Hello.
My name's Ruby Pachillo. I graduated from here in 2019, and I recognize more than half of you. It's so cool to see you. I just wanted to say that the last time I spoke at one of these meetings, it was when we were considering eliminating Mr. Jernigan's position. And we ended up getting Eric Day, who has brought such unbelievable depth to his position here and really changed the lives of many students. I was not a student of his, but I was very close with someone who was a student of his who, when Mr. Day came in, felt his interest in music double and did better in school and then went off and ended up studying music and is now crushing it. But before he went off to college, he brought more value to the town of Hastings. He started, putting in, his band played all around town and he set up events for students and he welcomed other students into the arts. And I think it's because of Mr. Day specifically that happened. So I wanted to emphasize that having a new educator come in is favorable, and having educators with a more diverse set of talents is favorable. Like Damaris, hi Damaris, so good to see you, was saying, we lost someone who knew how to play steel drums and how to teach steel drums. And that means that there are fewer students in the school who want to play a certain kind of music and who will show up to music classes. So I do believe that having more educators means more of an interest in music. And I also believe that many parents move to Hastings because they are wealthy creatives themselves, and that is why they make this choice of Rivertown as opposed to others. So I believe that the more that we invest in our music department, that actually directly reflects perhaps how much money will be invested into our school systems. So that was the point I wanted to bring to the table. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda review.
Oh, there's another comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Of course.
Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback a little on what Ruby said. This is Andy Zimmerman again. Well, you all know the catchphrase, diversity, equity, inclusion. Let's look at music. Starting with inclusion, we want to make sure that we include everybody in music who wants to do it and they don't feel pushed out because they're in an ensemble that's too big and they're not getting enough individual attention. Equity, you've got to have lessons, group lessons, so they can learn how to play their instruments, because if you expect everybody to have private lessons at the cost of thousands of dollars per year, a lot of parents just aren't going to be able to spring for that, similar to what we were saying about the school trip before. And then diversity, as we all know, Hastings could use more of that. We're moving away from European history and European-derived culture and trying to explore other areas of the world. And here we have way too many kids wanting to play percussion now, as I understand it, in the middle school. And yet we have these beautiful steel drums that were very expensive, and they're sitting there in a closet, and there's nobody to teach it. It was Mr. Jernigan. Mr. Jernigan's gone. So, let's get a new teacher who can do that. I'm glad about the 0.2 coming back, baby steps. Do four more of those baby steps, and we have a whole teacher. So,
Thank you. Thank you. Agenda review. Just looking at the next meeting on the 16th. 16th, right? Yeah.
Yep.
It's the budget vote. It's our initial budget vote. That's the hot topic for the night, right? Anything else there? 416. Yeah. Okay. And district highlights. Moving on to board comments. Are there any board comments?
I have
Oh, Jenny.
two different kinds of comments.
Of course.
One that I had planned to say and one that just has come. I very much appreciate having Ruby come and speak. I think it's great when we hear from students and when we hear from alums, and when tonight, I think it's so fascinating to have heard from, I can't remember his name, Clint?
Clint. Yeah.
Ruby, before you were, in our earlier board comments, there was someone who was a musician who was a Hastings High School alum from, I don't know how many years ago, but a very successful musician. And hearing him talk about things where you said exactly the same things that he said about teachers kind of lighting a spark and how important they are. It's just such an important thing to think about. And I think that we're all struggling with this, and I think we have to thank people in the community for raising the issue, for us to be perfectly clear about the decision, whatever decision we make, that we can feel good about knowing what we're doing or why we're doing it. And I don't know what the decision will be or how people will feel or vote, but, and again, to Bill's point, I think of people being really respectful about this in terms of how they're raising issues to the board, whether it's through writing or coming to board meetings. But I wanted to add something about it that I've been thinking a lot about, seeing a lot of mail come in. And I wasn't on the board last year when Mr. Rubino actually retired, and I'm sure that there was acknowledgement and, you know, but it actually made me cry, I think. But I think part of what people are reacting to also is Mr. Rubino leaving. And I think we can talk about a point 2, a point 4, blah, 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 whatever. And it was the same when Mr. Jernigan left, truthfully, who felt irreplaceable. But yet we hear that Mr. Day comes and he's, I guess, fantastic. But I think we're forgetting about the emotional part of Mr. Rubino leaving. And Mr. Rubino taught my kids, you know, in the 1990s when they were at Hillside. So, you know, dinosaur years ago. So I just wanted to put it out there that I think part of what, that's a piece of this too, that we can't, it's not about the decision or how we make the decision, but I think that there is that emotional piece of losing, well, we're losing a lot of people who are important this year and have lost some in the past couple of years. But I think losing Mr. Rubino is a big deal. And he's touched many, many, many children throughout the district. And I just wanted to kind of make that comment. I had asked Ruby to stay until I said that you're welcome to leave. My next comment is a totally other comment, just something I want to put out there for us to think about, not to talk about today, and it's for the future. But I was thinking about this week, thinking about the school break and the week off and our other week off. And my son is a teacher, and he teaches at an independent school. And they do, as you know, they do very different breaks. Mm-hmm. And they do a 2-week break. He just finished a 2-week break. And I have to tell you that he really had a vacation. He did what he loves to do, which I think is awesome. He goes away somewhere for the first week, and then he has a whole other week of vacation. And when I was with him last night, I was thinking about it because he was talking about going back to school and feeling really refreshed and like he really had a break. And it occurred to me, like, is that something, I don't even know if it's possible, because I know it's not what public schools tend to do. Is it possible that going forward that we could think about that, if that would be something in our calendar, doable, thinkable? It just feels like a break that's really needed for people. That it feels sometimes, and I don't know, you all could speak to it when we do talk about it, but sometimes with a week, it's like you just kind of get going and, you know, like, oh God, I just have a couple more days and we start all over again. And, you know, I always insist with my family in summer, we're not going away for 1 week. Like, what if it rains all week and we're at the beach? This summer, we're going away for 1 week. But anyway, I just wanted to put that out there as an idea. If it's even a possibility in public school, I don't even know. I can't even remember if we ever used to do that.
It's amazing what I forget fast, right? But I think we did build in 2 weeks this coming year, the winter break. I think we got there.
For the Christmas, New Year break.
It was a rare opportunity, and you as a board guided us to, and internally, the voices came out clearly.
Yeah.
Grab the 2 weeks when you can.
Right.
The dilemma is we are tied into a pretty strict network of aligning around BOCES, other calendars, and where our student placements are. And as independent schools are, they're all pretty clever at picking those same 2 weeks. I started my career in that world.
Oh, they do it all together. I mean, their calendar is
that's their own
completely
network.
together.
Yeah, and I still live in Greenwich. 28% of the school-age children are in independent schools, and the traffic patterns are lovely when they're out of town.
Right.
You know, so
No,
if
no,
we
I
could,
know they
we
all
would.
plan it
So
together.
my personal bias is, if having lived that, if we could, we would.
Mm-hmm.
We'll think on it. It's just the
No,
dilemma.
but I
We
realize,
are
you
tied.
just said it, you can't with all
We're
the other.
tied to some other larger authorities, believe it or not.
Anyway, I just thought I'd
Yeah.
throw it out for food for thought.
Also, they go far fewer. I mean, you know, they're at 170 days,
Oh, they're out of
160
school
days.
by
Yeah, you pay a lot of money.
June.
Yeah,
Pay a
they're
lot
out.
of money
So,
for fewer days
yeah,
of school.
Yeah, but I'll think on it.
Well, I don't think there's anything to think about. I think you kind of answered it really
All
already.
right, I'll stop thinking about it.
You got other things to think about.
Issue solved. Issue solved.
Oh, well, we could dream.
I have I had a board comment that I'm going to defer for next time because I really need to give room for the music concern. But my board comment was about, I had to leave early last week, so I listened to the board meeting, and it had to do with the misunderstanding of me saying the psychologist's position as being literal. I want to clearly state some of the calls that I got from the community as well, with even some people in Aldo-Vigi. So when I use the term administration, I'm not talking about authoritative position. I was talking about the work itself of doing the DI work. So the example I gave as psychologist was because I know the position is still HTA. All the psychologists, they are not HAA. They are contractually under the teacher association. That's why I decided last meeting, to stop saying administration, because I know since we are tired of heavy administration, it's a public comment, it's a public known thing in the community. So I'm not saying anything that has not been said. But the reason behind it was not literally, I don't care what they call it. I was just saying that the work itself needs to be done in a way that is effective, because it's not effective right now, and it's dividing our community as we speak. I'm not going to read what I had prepared, because I want to give room to the music, but I think that this is something that I want to revisit again after the budget, for us to look at DEI in a better way, because this community cares for the arts, it cares for diversity in its reality. Yes, I know things happen in the public, but we've worked and sorted things out because we like that transparency and clarity, and I love that about this district. So I'm hoping that we'll carry through in the schools as well and everywhere. So thank you. That's my board comment.
Thank you. Any other board comments?
I will add.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, Doreen, the
I
angel
love
is.
to startle everybody. No, go ahead. Go ahead, Teresa. I can wait.
I add as well to what Jody said about who Mr. Rubino is, and he has absolutely sparked a fire in my daughter playing the electric bass, and it feels like a big loss. And of course, how you eloquently put it, that that is part of the sentiment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Doreen?
I just wanted to say, sorry guys, I'll never be sick again.
You're like the Wizard of Oz.
I don't want to throw like a monkey wrench into this, but I just wanted us to consider for the future. I think the music lessons are great. I mean, I took music myself. I played the trombone and the cello, and my kids now participate, and all of our band and everything is chorus. Everything is so important. The musical theater that we have. I'd love to see if we could do something around just like music history and music appreciation and different styles of music, like just classes of music, like about learning about music. I think if in the middle of a day, if a kid has that, it could be, certainly could break up the day in terms of like you're learning different things, academic subjects. I know it's hard. I'm advocating for another person. I know. I'm just thinking in the future. In the middle school we have the AOK program and we have the FACS program. I don't know if there's a requirement in terms of the state, but I would love to see how we could think of other ways besides participating, because not every kid can participate. Not every kid's musical. I think it's wonderful that Hastings has these programs, and we've seen so much success. But just for regular kids who might not feel like they have the talent, and not everybody does, but everybody can appreciate music and listening to it and different styles of music. And anyway, I'm just putting it out there as an opportunity as we think about music, not just thinking about the kids who who feel like they want to engage in that talent, but everybody can appreciate music in some way and can learn about the history of it. And you could tie it in with social studies and the places they're learning about music at the time. And anyway, that was just my comment. It's just so important.
I love it, Dory.
Thank you. Thank you, Dory. Anyone else? No?
I mean, I guess my comment is just that, this is the time of year when things become really hard and they become really real, because we have to look towards really looking at the information that's presented to us, hearing the input that's shared with us from the community, various stakeholders. And, we are 7 individuals who the community honored us with, electing us into office, but also in that capacity, we have to make hard decisions. And not knowing what those decisions are, it's challenging because, I speak as a mom of 3 kids who've been in orchestra and have gone through the schools. And, I have very strong feelings and passionate feelings about how wonderfully the programs have served my own children. And I also think, that I kind of have to step out of that parental role and myself sitting here, because I have to think of also system-wide what the impact is of any one decision I make with respect to a music position or any other position, because I have, parents who also say to me, I'm really so happy that you offer photography. The breadth of things that we are able to provide to our students is only available to us because we make calls that, have ripple effects in other disciplines, whether it's, offering Calculus BC that only has, as Dr. McCursey referred to, X number of students. These are all things we want to offer as specialized programming as we can to our students. And, it comes down to, unfortunately, the fact that we have a finite amount of funds. And again, I go back to what we don't know in terms of what our funding is, at least as of now. So that's not to tip my hand as to what I think is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. It's just to say that we read your comments, we hear your comments, and we are 7 people who honestly want to make the best decisions in service to the entire district. Whether or not we come across that way all the time, or whether or not we seem passionate enough or sympathetic enough, I think I have very serious disagreements with my fellow trustees at times. But I think that one thing I have in common and that I share and respect about them is that they all come to the table with the best interest of serving this district and the students that comprise it. So, nobody's going to win a popularity contest serving on the BOE. It's not, you hear from the community most when they're very unhappy with you. And we're at the crossroads of that unhappiness, whether it's parents who are unhappy, teachers who are unhappy, community members. It all comes to us. And, that's why you voted us into office. Somebody's inevitably going to be unhappy about what we decide, and, we live to see another day. So that's, I guess, a comment more in service of we're trying our best, guys. So
Thank you.
that's it.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Yeah, I would just add very quickly that in support of that, I would like to thank the administrators who do such a good job of so openly and so deeply providing us information that keep these from being just simple, how are you feeling about this decisions? We these variables and dimensions of what's coming down the road, what's in the future, what's around us locally, what's the state, all these things are real, and they all play into, the types of decisions that we have to make. And, it's been very nice to be able to rely on you guys to provide us with all the angles and all the information, to be very public about it. It makes the end result a lot easier to arrive at, So thank you. Anyone else? No? Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.